Welcome to All Politics are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday and it's 6 o'clock, y'all know it's time for All Politics are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show, broadcasted live in our city, the great city of Newark, New Jersey, where our beloved mayor, our brother Raz J. Baraka, is the mayor here in this beloved city. So tonight we're going to talk about a number of things. Of course, let me just say right off the bat, my name is Ed Riley, and I'm one of your hosts. And then, of course, over there to my left, your right, is my brother. You got a name?
Me?
Yeah.
Do I have a name? I don't
No.
know.
No.
They took away everything, man. They
That's
took away
true.
my
They
name.
did.
Took a
You don't. You
hey,
probably don't
Jonathan
know what.
Alston.
You probably don't know what that real one is, but the one they gave you.
Yeah, well,
You
that's
know,
that's actually a real thing. It's actually a real thing.
it is a
There's a
real
slave
thing.
plantation in South Carolina called Alston Plantation, and if you
Yep.
meet someone with Alston, the name Alston, they either usually can trace the roots back to as far back as North Carolina or South Carolina.
Yep, they got one for Riley too down in South Carolina, Beaufort. You know,
Okay.
so of course, welcome my brother John Austin. We're both your hosts as well. You saw Michael popped up on the screen. He's in the background. Can you say what's up, Mike?
Yeah,
You
way to call
muted.
him out, Ed. Yeah, shy. Michael's a little shy.
Well, he always pops on the screen and put a picture. One
Hello?
day he need to
You
put
hear me?
his face up there.
You
You
just
hear me?
call him out there. He's shy.
Yep.
Way to
Wait,
go,
you
Ed. Way
hear
to
me?
go.
What's going on, Mike?
You hear me at all? Hold on.
Yeah,
We can
you
hear
kind
you.
of low. We can hear you.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Let me put this in a little bit more.
Yeah, you
Well, we
kind of
know
low.
that. So you're saying what's up, Mike?
Yeah, what's up, everybody? What's up? How's everybody doing? I'm
Was good.
backstage. Yeah.
Yep. So Mike is backstage, the
What's
guy
up,
that moves
everybody?
everything around for
How's
us.
everybody doing?
Uh, likes to put up pictures of Richard Pryor, but never puts up a picture of himself. But
So, right, they gotta have a legend up there. Nothing wrong with that.
but anyway, we're gonna have
Right, they gotta have a legend up there. Nothing wrong with that.
yeah. But anyway, we're gonna have a real jam packed show tonight. Of course, coming up, the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the runoff elections that's taking place in our city, actually happening next Tuesday, the 14th. So I
Yep.
want to make sure that you all are, definitely gearing up to go out and vote for your choice on the 14th. So we're going to talk about that first tonight, coming up at 6 o'clock. And then, of course, at 6:30, we're going to have Reverend Roundtree's son, who's going to make an announcement tonight for a new civic organization in our city called the Scott Cultural and Civic Foundation. So he's going to talk to us about that. They have a fundraiser coming up and a premiere for the new foundation. So that's going to happen at 6:30,
And
and then
at 7 o'clock, we're going to have the vote. We're going to hear from Larry Hamm. We always love having him
yeah,
here. We're also going to have Charlene Walker of Faith New Jersey on, and she's going to be talking about some of the ramifications of Buffalo. So she's going to be talking about that during part of the vote. And then at 8 o'clock, Ed, we talked about right before we came on. We were talking about a lot of the violence that's
yeah,
going on and happening.
yeah.
And Keesha Eure is going to be on. She's going
Okay,
to be on to talk about in the Office of Violence Prevention, and she's going to start talking about some of the things that they are doing and what the city's going through. Like you were, very, 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 very worried, very disturbed,
oh
right, man,
yeah,
about some recent
yeah,
things that happened within the city, and it seems like an uptick of violence because like any when you hear something, it's like it's just painful, it's wrenching, should not happen, and you kind of wonder when do we get past this? Like when
yep,
will we be at an age where it is not because it's sad, but the shocking, horrible thing is that it's not entirely unexpected, right? Like
right,
like as in we keep hearing these stories of individuals. getting killed. And this really isn't normal, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like, when you're dealing with mass shootings, when you're dealing with gun violence, and whether it be these AR-15s or it be just some coward with a gun, right?
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are like, why is this happening to such an extent in a way where it's almost normal and normalized? So yeah, that's one of those things where we'll be talking about
Yeah.
ramifications. So I look forward to that as well.
Yep, and the other piece to that, John, is that, listen, man, one of the things that I heard the mayor say is that we're talking about the age of these kids now, right, or as young as 10 years old, right, and that's absolutely hard to believe, man.
Whoa,
You know
whoa,
what I mean?
Ed, you said 10?
10 years old, right, as young as 10, right. And so you're talking about 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and 12-year-olds, right?
Wait. That what?
That are committing violence in the city of Newark, right? As young as 10 years old, And so,
So
so we've got to have a way to be able to talk to these kids, right, at that young age, right? Like what is it that's going on?
you're talking about really a lot of, and we're going to get into more of this with Keesha, but
Yeah.
the first thing that comes in mind is, what are the services that are provided?
There you go.
And
There you go.
because when you're that young, it's not the kid's fault, right?
Yeah.
Like, that means
Yeah.
that there's certain things that are happening that just should not.
That's
there's
right.
certain things that they have experienced, right?
Right.
That have never been fully taken. That they've never been getting help in counseling for. That's
right.
level of anger
Yeah.
that comes from neglect. But we're getting ready to jump into our first part. First, thank you, Mark Bonanno.
Mark,
editor
welcome
from
back to the
Untitled
show.
New York.
Yeah.
Friend of all politics are local. Welcome back to the show, man. Welcome
Always
back.
And Mark always leaves us with a cliffhanger when he leaves. Like we run out of time.
We got the ultimate cliffhanger this week.
Very much. Because, well, let's start quickly with the South and East Ward. Your predictions about the South Ward.
Well, predictions are always dangerous at best, because you never know what the voters are going to do in the end. You think you do, but you don't. That's probably one of the best things about being a journalist. You never exactly know what's going to happen. Now, that being said, in the South Ward, the runoff that's going to take place, you have Patrick Council, who is on Mayor Baraka's ticket, up against independent Terrence Bankston. Mr. Bankston has run numerous times before. He has a solid base of support in the South Ward. Obviously, Pat Council has the advantages of the Baraka slate machine behind him. Based on looking at the results from last time, where in a runoff, it's 50% plus one. Unless you receive that magic number in the first round in the May elections, then you must go on until it's determined in the June election that you finally have an absolute majority. So while Mr. Council did not achieve that number, and neither did Mr. Bankston, Mr. Council got 46% of the vote that first round. Okay, now again, you can't tell, doesn't mean the exact same voters are going to come back the second time. And we should talk about turnout. It doesn't mean the exact same percentages are going to base out this way, but he's quite close to achieving 50%. One would think that he would have a greater chance of getting over the top, but I know Mr. Bankston's working hard. He's working the doors hard. He has every reason to believe, to try to succeed as well. So that result, there's the South. The East Ward,
and I do like the idea of campaigns are fought, and Terrence Bankston is somebody who's not giving up. He is knocking on doors, but it given that he is an independent, if you're going to bet on it, you'll bet on it. But that's why democracy is important, right? And democracy is important because it has to be contested, and you got to make people earn it, right?
So having said that, now we got the East Ward.
Now
I lived down neck for at least a dozen years. These things are always fraught with emotion, very personal. Everybody knows everybody. At the same time, there are overarching issues in the East Ward that they're very important. If you look at the rate of development that's going on down there, it's over the moon, and that's affecting a neighborhood where already double parking is de rigueur. Infrastructure is a very serious problem. Every time it rains even a little bit hard, you need an actual ferry to get across Ferry Street.
Wow, that was clever. Like that.
Wow.
All right.
But I mean, seriously, Hurricane Ida was a nightmare. I was wading around with water up to my waist, around South Street. Does like that every year. But what we have in terms of the two candidates left, and it was very, very close. You have Michael Silva, who was a 28-year veteran of the Newark Police Force before he retired. He was a community detective, very active in the East Ward during that time. He is up against Anthony Campos, who was previously the public safety director for the entire city of Newark. Also, obviously, a very lengthy police career. Now, public safety is a very important issue in the Ironbound because people in the Ironbound, particularly the insular nature of the place, the Ironbound, bound by the iron of the tracks, sealed off from the rest of the city, they take their quality of life very, very seriously. They want clean streets. They want safe streets. They pride themselves on it. So the fact that you have two police officers going up against each other isn't surprising. Now, in the first round of this in May, they were separated by maybe a percentage point in terms of the two top vote getters. That was it. There was another candidate, Louis Weber, who was put up by the mayor on his slate. Did not fare well at all. Tied with Jonathan Seabra. Jonathan Seabra, family name well known in the Ironbound for running supermarkets and bars and restaurants. Those two, Seabra touting himself as a progressive, perhaps in time as the neighborhood changes, perhaps more, as the Ironbound potentially gets more gentrified, maybe some people would gravitate more towards a progressive like a Jonathan Seabra over time.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because when you talk about the neighborhood and you talk about everything that's being built, when you look at the margins of victory and how many people vote, the new building will probably outvote everybody in the there's a big, huge building that's just coming up.
And they're going up all over the place in every available lot.
Right.
So something is going to change, right?
Like the person who wins this time may not even get close next time because I think the voting population is going to be very different because everybody who moves in is going to be voting.
Right. Yeah. And again, the conditions of that is, do people actually move back to the cities after COVID? That's an overarching issue that is far beyond Newark, New Jersey. It's the whole country. We're going to have to see. But if the pattern had been in place as it was 2 or 3 years ago, I think you're absolutely right in terms of those people moving in. It's a very different population.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people when Jonathan talk about that building that they're building, that huge building right there. There's some people I'm sure spent a tremendous amount of money on a feasibility study to determine whether or not that was a good investment for them coming out of COVID. So there's some people betting on that.
Yeah,
and you're right. The complexity of the voting model in that area is going to change drastically. You can believe that.
Yes, absolutely. But let's say this round, what's going to happen next Tuesday on the 14th, more of what we're used to in the Ironbound.
Right.
So we've got Silva, we've got Campos. Now, Silva is the approved candidate of the North Ward Democratic Committee, one of the major forces in Newark politics, right? Everyone who is essentially associated with that wing of Newark politics, which is essentially, if we're looking at it demographically, it's largely Latino, aligned with Portuguese speakers. Everyone from that wing of this divide is essentially lined up now behind Silva. You have Essex County Executive Joe DiVincenzo, right? The inheritor of the North Ward Democratic power base, trained by the great Big Steve Adubato, who taught, from the North Ward Center, who taught everyone that political model. You've got the 3 Latino councilmen. You have Aníbal Ramos, from the North Ward. You have City Council President and at-large Councilman Louis Quintana. You have Carlos Gonzalez, also at large, all lined up behind Silva. The 29th Legislative District, too, is also uniformly behind Silva. Senate Majority Leader Teresa Cruz, Eliana Pinto-Marin, Assemblywoman, and Assemblywoman Shanique Spate, across the board. Now, what makes this all very interesting is Ross Baraka has also endorsed Michael Silva.
Right.
Now,
Yep.
the two blocks in power basically are, you've got the North Ward block that I've already described, and then you've got the Baraka block. The North Ward block, again, Portuguese and Latino, based in primarily the North and East wards. The Baraka block, essentially based in the largely African-American neighborhoods in the South, Central, and West wards. Okay, so wait, why would Baraka do that? That doesn't seem somewhat sensible. In this case, it is, because Baraka, by essentially, at least from my analysis, we put a piece up today on Tap Into Newark earlier today about analyzing the importance of the West Ward in this race and how it can change the entire city dynamic based on the results. He has endorsed Silva with the idea of, okay, we are at peace with you, forces of the North Ward, right? We absolutely want no problem whatsoever, because they want to focus their resources. The Baraka machine wants to focus their resources exclusively on the West Ward as strongly as possible. The assumption being council will win in the South, but we need, not just want, we need the West Ward.
Now, the thing that I thought was interesting is, I got a knock on my door, and it was North Ward Councilman Anibal Ramos, who was like, "Hey, Silva, and he was, like they are going hard for Silva right now, in a way that it just seems overwhelming in terms of just what you see in terms of people putting up posters and signs and people knock. I've had Silva people knock on my door like maybe 5 or 6 times in the last week, right? And that's just when I've been home.
But at the same time, Anthony Campos has his own base. He has his own presence in the neighborhood. Mind you, 4 years ago, he lost by a very, very narrow margin to incumbent Augusto Amador, who chose not to run again this year after serving 24 years as the East Ward councilman. So he has reason to believe he has a fair shot. Right. Even in terms of law enforcement, Armando Fontoura, the Essex County Sheriff, lined up behind Silva, no problem. And, Armando Fontoura is a fixture in the Ironbound neighborhood, a well-loved figure. But as I mentioned before, Campos was public safety director of the city of Newark. So was Anthony Ambrose. Anthony Ambrose went with Campos.
Ah, okay. So what you're saying is that there's a lot of mainstream support and there's a lot of established machine support for Silva, but that independent has proven that he's strong against established forces, right?
He certainly has a chance. And I think the first round demonstrated that. And, because again, you cannot base it exclusively on the results from May, but everything was so evenly divided. It was basically 35 Silva, 35 Campos, 15 Seabra, 15 Weber. You tell me.
Right.
You tell me.
So I got a question. I mean, you just broke some news, because I didn't hear that Ambrose had lined up behind Campos. I didn't hear it. Yeah, no, was that made public recently?
That was made public. It was. I want to say it was about several weeks ago. And maybe it's quieter because he's not the public safety director anymore. That's Brian O'Hara now. But there's all these things going on behind the scene. But Jonathan's point is well taken. Institutional power, in this case, is firmly behind Silva. Right.
Well, I want to welcome our new co-host, Kaleena Berryman. Welcome to All Politics is a Local and the All Politics a Local family. So honored, seriously honored to have you on. Just an incredibly well-known education activist, has been doing great work inside of Newark for many years. Has been a friend of our show for a long time, and we are happy and honored to have you as a co-host.
Well, we actually reactivating her, man. So
true.
It's like she's being reactivated.
Yes,
What's up,
Kaleena? Here, nothing much. Just listening to Mark talk about this runoff.
Yeah, Mark is doing a good job breaking it down.
But he's jumping in the West Ward, because he's like, the West Ward is where it's at. He's like, West. He's like, go West, young man. Go West.
Look West.
Here we go.
Right.
Here we go.
Okay. So as I was saying, Barack has endorsed Silva in order to maintain peace with the North, so he can fully focus his efforts on the West Ward. Why is the West Ward so important? Okay. Let us assume, and again, I respect very much the efforts of Terrence Bankston, right? Assume council wins in the South. Okay. you now still have 4 people in a Baraka block on one side, right? Whoever wins in the East Ward, generally, Campos, I think his relationship with Baraka is a little bit more fraught with controversy. I think there's a degree of bad blood there, but in many ways, whoever wins the East Ward essentially sticks with the 3 Latino council members from the North Ward. Mm-hmm. So that's another block, right? 4 and 4. Now you have the West. In the West, Dupree Kelly is the approved candidate of Mayor Baraka. Dupree Kelly, a member of the Lords of the Underground hip hop trio, has a community foundation. Says, hey, I want to come back and I want to, serve my people in the West Ward. His opponent, who is an independent, is Chigozie Onyema. Chigozie Onyema, family with Nigerian roots, right? Worked hard educationally, Howard undergrad, NYU law, worked in the Murphy administration in one of the departments run by Sheila Oliver, Department of Community Affairs, and also worked for the Institute of Social Justice, based here in Newark. Ryan Haygood doing a lot of good work there.
Yep.
So you have these 2 guys, both ambitious, both thinking they could come back, help their people in the West Ward. The West Ward's this unique ward in many ways. It's an anomaly. It's a ward, of homeowners. The type of big catalytic development you see with, these large developments coming in. Less so because there's just simply not as many lots. But it doesn't mean you should take it for granted, because historically the West Ward has always been an outlier. The West Ward always does, in many ways, what it wants to do.
And break that down. Like, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that they've always been independently minded. An easy example to prove that is the 1998 mayoral election. Okay, Sharp James runs, crushes it, wins by a very wide margin, except in the West Ward. Why? Because then West Ward Councilman Ron Rice Sr., now state senator, he held it down in his own ward, despite being crushed across the board. Ron Rice Sr. later on, as he goes further into his state Senate career, of which he's been in there now for a very long time, he fought off 3 separate attempts when he was knocked off the line to knock him out of his seat in the Democratic primary. Fought him off each time. Because the West Ward is like, wait, this is our guy. We know this guy. We see this guy out there every day. He's knocking on our doors. He's in our community. Who is some outside force trying to tell us what to do? I think it's entirely conceivable after, and again, I encourage you to read the piece we put up today about, the analysis of what the West Ward race means. I spoke to Ron Rice Jr., and Ron Rice Jr. was talking about, again, he himself was a West Ward councilman, son of Ron Rice Sr. He was councilman from 2006 to 2014, chose to work for a public charter schools group in Washington, D.C., lives down there now. But he looks at that ward and says, this ward, if Mayor Baraka had real competition in this last election, he still would have crushed it in the West Ward. But that doesn't mean the people in that ward are just going to vote the line all the time. They will potentially split tickets because they really want someone to represent them, to kind of represent that fundamental idea that we are an independent people,
Well, I mean, we have Pamela Daniels, who is watching, and she's a well-known activist within the West Ward, an organizer within the West Ward, and there's some great conversations that can be had in terms of just like, the complexity of what the West Ward means. I've talked to other people who've been like, the last there's some conversations I've had with some other people who are like, the mayor picked the last one, and there's a hurdle, right? Like I think that part of the reason why it's so close and so neck and neck is that the last person who was on the mayor's ticket was disgraced, right?
Right.
And so you have to me, you have 2 great candidates. Yeah. But I think that, it is definitely going to be a little more difficult in the West Ward, given what you're talking about as their independent streak. And also given that, what happened last time. So I think that that's one of the reasons why this race, that West Ward race, you're not. I mean, that's just probably going to be door to door, and I don't know if we are even going to know a winner on Tuesday.
You may not. And look, even because of the way turnouts have been abysmal in the last couple elections overall. It was terrible on May 10th for the first round. You only had 3,900 people vote total in the West Ward. That's maybe about, I want to say 12 or 13% of the total eligible West Ward voters. All right, if you got 3,900 this time, you could have as many as 2,500 people voting, because generally in a runoff there's less. So could as many as 25. You could have as little as 1,500 people
right
deciding this. And again, you know, it's on a micro level very important, because people want to know that their ward is in good hands, and they really need to know their ward is in good hands after what just happened. You know, I think it's arguable to say that the next West Ward Constable must not only have, you know, political authority and, you know, the authority that derived from getting the vote of the people, but you've got to have moral authority going forward, because, you know, this is a very serious thing that happened. One thing, and it's going to be interesting to see if this plays out, is we covered, as part of our coverage in Tap into Newark, questions about election reports going into this election. Now, Dupree Kelly ran as an independent in 2018. You know, he got his name out there, trying hard. That's all well and good. This time, 4 years later, he said, okay, I'm going to run with the Barakas. I think this will increase my chances of winning, which is a very commonsensical belief. He had $13,000 left over from his campaign in 2018. Now, when you have money left over at the end of a campaign, according to state election law, you either must disperse it one way or the other, or you roll it over into a campaign to come. Name it what you want, you know, Dupree 2022, you know, Alston 2026, whatever you want to call it. Now, upon hearing some possibilities that there were financial irregularities, and again, my ears pricked up because specifically of what happened with Joe McCallum. Joe McCallum, who pled guilty in March on federal corruption charges, specifically, you know, for taking bribes, for taking kickbacks, for filing a false return. You know, how you do your paperwork and your business with your paperwork, that's critical. It's something that really needs to be looked after in general, and it also really needs to be looked after specifically when you've had an example of McCallum's malfeasance. You know? Well,
and I'm just gonna, in all fairness, when we had this conversation last time, we did call him up and he came on our show, and he did really talk about that. There were some technical issues, but he started talking about like his accountant. He talked about, you know, his accountant made a mistake, and you know, he said it was actually just a clerical error. He went back in, he fixed it, but he pushed back on the idea of Joe McCallum, because he's like, I ain't taking no bribe. Like, one is a bribe, right? Like he was Joe McCallum.
There is no one is saying that McCallum, that Kelly's got money in the floorboards of his house starting a slush fund.
Right.
But the idea to be
like that, it just in terms of the campaign, like, because what he was pushing back was like, and it's funny because Joe McCallum endorsed him, and I'm like,
I was just going to say, and you know,
do that, like that's not the endorsement you want, man.
Right, and you know, look, I'm sure Kelly did not, you know, it wasn't exactly.
He didn't seek it, right?
But again, you know, you would hope whoever the councilman is going to be positively, you know, dotting I's, crossing T's 5 times over, you know, retentive about that type of stuff because of what just took place. You know, what we found disturbing in our news organization is that when I saw these irregularities, and yeah, it could be a clerical mistake, that's fine. We reached out to both to the candidate, Kelly, to the treasurer, who made a mistake, supposedly, to the Baraka campaign, and to Midi Baraka, Amiri Baraka Jr., the mayor's chief of staff and brother, who's often very closely involved in these campaigns. That's 10 separate attempts to say, please explain this. No reply. All right. Now, preview, as a matter of fact, running tomorrow and Tap into Newark. We've had one-on-one interviews for each race, for the East, the South, the West. Our West Ward race will be going up tomorrow. And Dupree Kelly does speak out about, read it for yourself what he says about what happened with the money. But again, you've got people in the West Ward who are already independently minded. They're already antsy. You've already got to show them, we don't care what you're doing in any other ward. You've got to show us. Questions like that, need to get answered quickly, immediately, as fast as possible, particularly in the context of what's taking place.
So let me just ask this question, John. So Mark, just real quick, right? Because we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask: so is this race really going to be a matter of turnout? Since you were talking about a moment ago, 3,900 votes, 3,900 voters came out, and then generally in runoffs is less. So it's really going to be a matter of who can get their folks out to the polls. Isn't that really what it's going to be about?
Absolutely. And what's going to be interesting in this case is this could not be, because the turnout numbers could be so low, this isn't going to be a matter of hundreds. This could be a matter of dozens in terms of who ultimately wins. Now, what's interesting in this case is, once again, you would think the automatic advantages of the machine. You've got the entire Baraka machine behind you. Midi Baraka running his street machine, will move into the West Ward in numbers to try to make sure people get out to the polls. Now, what's also interesting, though, is that I think Chigozie Onyema, while not having, the institutional machine behind him and not having run as many elections as the Baraka has for, a very long time, for 20 years now. I think he's built up his own group of people, his own group of door knockers, his own organization to at least try to compete, to try to get who they think their voters are out to the polls.
Yeah.
And then, and then it's all about organization. Will his local organization be able to hold off an onslaught that will be thrown against him by the Barakas?
Right. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see what happens on Tuesday. Thank you so much again for coming on. Always good conversations to be had. So thank you. And also, again, we always ask you this question. You always give us this answer. But who are you listening to right now?
Well, again, often the election season, often rolling with the classics, right? I've been listening to a lot of Mobb Deep, Shook Ones Part 2. Election time, getting closer to God in a tight situation.
Wow. Wow.
All right. So thank you so much, man. And we'll have you back on. We'll probably have you back on soon just to talk about what happened. So
please, I would love that.
We definitely will get back on.
Thank you very much for having me. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Mark.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. We are moving on to the second half hour in our 6 o'clock spot. And Ed, introduce this next segment, right? Because this is cool, right? Like in terms of having a foundation that's trying to do some really good things. So Ed, lead the way.
Well, we're actually excited about it. Whenever we see, Levar, he's actually been around All Politics Are Local so long that you almost start to feel like he's part of our show. Never been on the show, never say anything. He just sits in the background, watch his mother, and do all of that. But always been with us, and we're real excited to have him come on to talk about the new foundation. I'm excited about it. And naturally they have a premiere for the organization and a fundraiser. So, wanted them to come on and debut that with us and to talk with us about it. And then also to introduce Reverend Johnson to us, who is one of his board members as well. So welcome to the show, Levar. Pleasure to have you, my brother. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Thank you to all the dignitaries that are on the show. As Mr. Riley said, I remember being my mother first was on the show. I remember just being in the background, listening, paying attention, as much as I could because, technology. So I was probably on my phone half of the time. But, it's crazy how, life and, it comes back full circle. So I'm truly honored and blessed to be on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm almost at the headquarters, so I'm going to be able to get out of the car and actually have a good background, good setting. So I apologize.
Well, why don't you go on and introduce Brother Johnson to us?
Absolutely. So I met Reverend Johnson, Big Brother Nick. I would say when I was maybe 6. Well, he probably knew me before I knew myself, pretty much. He was a young minister at the church, at Good Neighbor Baptist Church, where my mother sits at, 100 Chancellor Avenue in Newark. And yeah, he was a firecracker. He was, Reverend Johnson definitely came up under the leadership of Reverend Blackwell, and thanks to him and thanks to my mother, she said, how do you feel about Nick being a part of the board? How do you feel about him, actually handling some of the hard work? I said that'll be the best person. He's very well spoken. He went to Princeton, and I said, it'll be great for me to be under his leadership and learn from him as well. So yes, Reverend Johnson.
Well, Reverend Johnson, welcome to the show, my brother.
I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, so glad to be here. Thank you all for having me. What Levar said, his grandmother, Madam Scott, we all know and we all have such respect and regard for her legacy and for her life. I know the Roundtree family and the Scott family for a long time. Madam Scott was actually founder of our home church, Good Neighbor in Newark, and now we have a foundation, the Newark-Scott Cultural and Civic Foundation Incorporated, that honors the legacy of Madam Scott and seeks to empower young entrepreneurs, particularly people of color and women entrepreneurs, as they try to navigate this hard world of business and being creative and dealing with some systemic issues that prevent them from being successful. We want to be an advocate. We want to be a resource for those young entrepreneurs, and we also, want to be an archive for our community to tell the stories of African Americans who have been so integral to this city for hundreds of years, chief among them being Madam Scott. So our foundation seeks to honor her in this way and the lives of many other Newarkers who have made this such a rich and vibrant city.
Jonathan, you have a question for him?
Well, I mean, what is the foundation? I see the mansion, and I've seen it for years. I grew up there, not grew up there because it was abandoned for years, but I grew up going up and down and past it and stuff like that. So is what you're doing associated with the property that's there?
Yeah.
And the renovation, and talk to us about that, because that's been a haunted house, and then it looks real nice, because I was people are dead in there. Right, there's got to be people who are dead. I made up so many stories about that mansion over the years, and they've been fun stories too. I didn't realize that was related to Reverend Roundtree, right? Until very recently.
And it's such a phenomenal history in that building. It's such a phenomenal history and such a great story, and her legacy, and then how Councilwoman-elect Roundtree just exhibits the queendom so well.
So tell a story, Kaleena. What's the history?
Well, I don't know it very well. More, but let's let them tell it. But I know that, the history of entrepreneurship, of mentorship, of business, of growing Black women entrepreneurs. Miracles happen in that. So just tell us more detail, but I know that it was a special place.
Well, from the beginning, the mansion was built in the 1890s by a German immigrant, Gottfried Kruger, who became a millionaire himself from making beer. He had a brewery in Newark, and in the 1950s. Madam Scott bought the mansion cash. She had come up from South Carolina in the 30s.
Wait, did you say cash?
Yes, that's the story. She bought it cash.
Wow.
She came up in the 30s.
Let me just stop you there, Brother Johnson. You talk about a boss.
Oh yeah,
that's a boss.
Absolutely.
Right. Cash.
And
wow.
And between when she came up to Newark in the 1930s and in the 1956, I want to say, when she bought the mansion, in those 20 or so years, she had built an empire.
I was watching, by the way. She said yes.
She started her beauty school, Scott's Beauty Culture School.
I want to hear this.
Yeah. She had several salons throughout the city. There's still a generation of beauticians and beauty culture experts who went to Scott's beauty and culture school. And from the mansion, not only did she have her studio in the school, but she had a host of different enterprises. She had Kitty Taylor ran her radio show out of the mansion. Recording studio, churches. There was a community service hub where she each year would give out food to the children in the neighborhood. I mean, it was a community house, and our foundation seeks to restore that. We're connected to the restoration of the mansion, but not directly. The mansion is privately owned now by a development corporation.
No.
And if you see what's going on there, not only is there the restoration of the mansion, but there is also living and workspaces behind the mansion. Makerhoods is the organization that's doing the restoration and kind of the revitalization of that area.
Do we want to say?
Yeah.
Do we dare say? I'm just asking. Do we dare say the word? Is it gentrification? I'm asking, right? Because you're like a corporate corporation bought it. And I'm like, no. It was not
before we say that, though,
white women with babies jogging out the house. No. Is that what this has come down to? No.
Well, the model of it, Nick, I don't know if you are familiar with Makerhoods, but it's owned by a man named Avi Tellius, who his vision is I think is a very good one. He wants to encourage entrepreneurs, particularly people of color entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs. And what his vision is to have combined living and workspaces. So people who are entrepreneurs, they can rent both an apartment and the workspace on the lower level of the building at a combined price. And they can have their shops on the first floor and live, on the upper floors. And then there'd be a combination of income-based housing, but also market rate housing in that building.
Will there be a Starbucks?
I don't know. Ask the bar.
Will there be a coffee shop?
There won't be a Starbucks.
Be in there.
Yes, we will.
Yeah,
so that's all I care about. Okay.
So we will. We will be the stewards of the Madam Scott Library, which will be on the first floor of the restored mansion. So the mansion itself will be rented to various businesses who in their agreement need to have a community service attached to their work. So if a real estate company owns space in the building, then they need to offer workshops and programs to help people in the community with home ownership. And there's still a lot of things that are being worked out on that end with Makerhoods, but our work as the foundation is to steward the library and to make it a community space so that people will know the story of Madam Scott, the accurate story of Madam Scott, honor her legacy, honor the work of Black people, of Black women, of people whose stories haven't been told or are being relegated to the margins. We want to center the story of Madam Scott and make sure she doesn't get lost in all of what we might call, whether it's the revitalization or gentrification of the Central Ward.
Yeah, just her business story, I think in and of itself is encouraging.
Yeah, right? That's a local. That's
all those things that all those different businesses that she had, as it related to training people how to become entrepreneurs. I think that in of itself, in that space alone, is worthy of taking young women through there, right, and touring that and telling that story. I think that's the beauty of this foundation.
Now you told me about how she bought it with cash. I don't know, Ed. You're telling me about training. I want to hear give me as much of the story as you can. Who is this boss woman who goes around buying mansions with cash?
She's CJ Walker.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a very important comparison. Man,
yeah, I mean, she is believed to be
the same thing. And when you own and you're working with your own, you can do those kind of things, right? She doesn't have to go to the bank and be turned down and treated like dirt because her skin was dark. She had her own goddamn money. and make a move. Right?
And she is believed to be the first
shoulder she stands on, and we need those stories. And we need places like that to carry those stories.
I mean, she's believed to be the first Black woman millionaire in the city. I mean, you know, there's so much attached to her name and to her legacy that many people just don't know. You know, most people just see that mansion that has been, you know, in horrible disrepair.
House.
Yeah, it's a haunted house, right? But from that haunted house, you know, there is a story of a majestic Black woman who made it not just her private residence, but her place of business, a refuge for people who needed, you know, a place to live in between homes. It was a school, it was a daycare, it was a church. Good Neighbor Baptist Church started there, and some variation in several other churches. So, I mean, a radio show was there. There was so much that's in between those walls that we may not know.
So she made her money first with hair care. Was it like you said, the C.J. Walker? Was it just that she was a businesswoman, or the same type of businesswoman?
Yeah. So Levar, if you want to jump in, I don't know if you want to speak about your grandma.
This would be the best time for my mother to chime in and type something that I may not be able to answer correctly.
Well, again, when she came up from South Carolina, she started as a domestic worker, but she, you know, worked her way through beauty school, and learned hair care. You know, being a beautician, doing hair design, you know, whatever they were calling it back in the 30s. But within, you know, 10 years, she had started her own beauty school and was teaching, you know, hair care and beauty culture. You know, she had her own hair studio in the mansion itself and had, you know, different salons throughout the city. So she not only was a beautician or hairstylist, but she also trained other women to be beauticians and hairstylists, and some of them are still alive today.
Wow. It would be incredible, Levar, to speak to some of them women. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're going to me and my mother, we spoke about actually reaching out to some of the people that were still alive that were, you know, part of her the school, and some of the people that were, you know, closely affected by her. So, you know, that's in the works. So by the time that the mansion is up and running and is able to, they're able to see it, we actually want to we want that to actually happen. We want to be able to reach out to those people, and hopefully have them able to, you know, come and experience what is now, you know, it's still the Kruger-Scott mansion, but it's, you know, it's gonna be revitalized. But also what that place was, what she offered was a place for Muslims to meet as well. So we're talking about the interfaith. So we're talking about the interfaith that my mother does now. It's full circle. She's doing the exact same thing that, you know, my grandmother did when no Christians, especially no Christians back then. Don't mean to bash my good
I would
Christians,
love to know the years of that.
Right.
But
right. Yeah.
Yeah, in the back, which was now they tore that down.
It was a theater
back, which was the theater. Yes, they that was a place where she allowed the Muslims to come and meet regularly, with no problem. So to talk about, you know, the interfaith that my mother's doing on a larger scale now, it's so profound that my mother was so young at that age.
Right.
Because, you know, she passed. My mother was about 22, 23.
Wow.
Around my age that I am now. So the work that she was doing, she just, you know, the work that my grandmother was doing, my mother's doing all over again.
It lives on. It lives on.
It lives on. And it's in her DNA, and you know, I see this in my DNA. Thank God.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Levar. Like, we see the greatness in you. You know, I remember. I don't even know if you remember, but briefly you were in a program at ALI that we had.
Absolutely.
The RWJ program.
Absolutely.
And just to see you over the years, you know, you just embody the same greatness of your legacy. And so I'm so glad that you're a part of this work.
Thank you.
And just, it's a beautiful thing for us to have legacy, and for your grandmother to have created legacy and to pass it down, and that she has a lineage that respects it so much and respects her so much that you guys are holding it up fiercely. So just thank you all for sharing your grandmother's legacy with us, and for you and your mother and the work that you all do in this city. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. But I have,
grandmother's matter. Is there a timetable on when the work is going to be done on the building?
So it's projected to be the ribbon cutting is they're supposed to be opening up in 15 days. Well, not 15, but about 20 days. So it's supposed to be on the 30th. Now that's when it's supposed to be up and running, and operations will start. Now the ribbon cutting is not supposed to be until sometime in September. So look, as long as they get it done, as long as it's done the right way, because we see all these projects throughout the city and all over the country get put up, and they don't last that long, especially at the magnitude that this is supposed to be at. So we wanted look, if it takes until 2023, prayerfully not, for this to be up and running, as long as it's done the right way and it's done ethical and legal, I just hope, that's all I can ask for.
And one of the things that's important to recognize is that we, the work that we do is central to the mansion, but also outside. We are a community organization, the Newark-Scott Foundation. And one of the things, that we had touched on, we are interested and committed to preserving the stories of our people, Madam Scott in particular, but there are so many others, her students that still are around. So one of our projects now is to archive their stories, to, have a video and audio of their stories, and just them recounting their experiences in Newark and with the mansion and with Madam Scott and their own stories. Of how they were successful and navigated life in Newark in an era that many of us are removed from. So it's important that we know our history, so that the obstacles and the oppressions of the past we don't repeat and we won't tolerate. So, but also to elevate all of our people who, in spite of the odds, they still succeeded. They were still great people. They were still people who accomplished great things and left us such a rich legacy. So.
Now, Nicholas, how can we support the work? Because I was Miss Councilwoman-elect Roundtree is just there for everybody. I was at my dear great cousin's funeral, and I was not expecting to see Louise Carrell.
She shows up everywhere.
And there she is, just always.
She was rocking on her birthday last week.
She's just there. I was like, oh my goodness, she's here too. And so I feel like there are some things as a community we have to learn how to invest in our own, so that we don't have to rely on others to fund our work. Yeah. So how can we support? I want to be able to be like a monthly donor, where there's even if it's $10, so how can the community pour back into this family that has poured so richly into all of us? What can we do?
And isn't there something coming up on the 15th?
Yes. So I'm so glad you asked. Yes. So we have a meet and greet coming up on.
I'm trying to post it now.
Yes, at Duchess Restaurant, the Trip Hotel. It is an opportunity for you to meet and greet some of our leaders, our board members, our advisory council members. We have so many wonderful stakeholders who have contributed their time, their talent, their treasure. So the way that you can come to that, you can show up the day of, but we also would invite you to email us at newarkscottccf@gmail.com if you're interested in tickets. They're $50. If you want to be
Newark-Scott, say it again.
newarkscottccf@gmail.com. That's our email address. We would very much appreciate you just shooting us the email and saying that you're interested in being a part of our meet and greet. If you want to be a regular contributor, we do have a Cash App and a PayPal that you can donate to. Yep. So our Cash App is $Newark-Scott-CCF. And if you want to pay through PayPal or contribute through PayPal, just use our email account, newarkscottccf@gmail.com. But we certainly hope people will come out next Wednesday to be a part of our meet and greet. You'll learn more about our foundation and the work that we're doing. Check out our social media pages, our Facebook page. We have Instagram, Twitter. You see that we have we have a community panel that we did a few months ago focusing on the Central Ward. We have some wonderful people who are part of that panel. So we did an inaugural community panel, and it was just a great opportunity to introduce ourselves to the community. But now that we are coming out of a pandemic almost, we want to do some in-person stuff. So hopefully we can get out, but completely. But this meet and greet will definitely be an opportunity to see those people in person who have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make this organization a strong one.
Well, I think that you all know that, here at All Politics Are Local, that Reverend Roundtree is a part of our show here. And we consider Levar family. Totally, and so all that we can do to support this, because I see this as a Newark Foundation. I think it's much bigger than your vision, right? I think it's great what y'all doing, but I think this is really something for our city, right? I think that, what your vision is for this, and I think what Madam Scott did for our community, she ought to be celebrated in that way because of all that she has given to this community, and of course what Roundtree gives to this community. And so she put that same kind of spirit in Levar, and I'm so proud of this young brother that I'm glad to be watching him right now, because I can only imagine what he's going to be able to accomplish through this foundation, not only in terms of the legacy for his family, but also what he's going to do for this community. And of course, with your help, Brother Johnson, is going to be just some tremendous work in this community. So we are so proud of y'all.
We thank you so much.
We look to support y'all with that. Are there any final words that you want to leave us with? Of course, repeat where that meet and greet is going to take place. But if there are any final words you guys have, please feel free to share them.
Yeah. So yeah, the meet and greet is at the Trip by Wyndham Newark's downtown 24 East Park Street in Newark, Wednesday, June 15th from 6 to 10 p.m. Hope to see you all there. And Mr. Riley, I want to truly appreciate you and all the dignitaries that are on here. Also, a lady that just put something in the chat to Reverend Roundtree, my mother, my angel on earth. If it wasn't for her, none of this would be possible. She's so faithful. Yeah. She's so faithful to not only the community, but to God. Because I remember riding by Court Street and riding by Martin Luther King. And every time, when she first started working for City Hall, this is when I was in high school. So from 2009 to 2013, I remember almost every day looking at her cry, looking at her break down, looking at her just be so distraught. And I'm like, Mom, let's make our own. Let's do our own. How about we do this our own? And she said, she ain't even had no words to say. But my mother always told me, if you read the Bible, it says, if you're a few over few, he'll make you a ruler over all. So just to see her faithful and just to see her dedicated to doing the work of God, building the kingdom, and being so dedicated to just being a good person and helping people day in and day out, sacrificing days that we could have ate together at the table just to have someone put food on their table. It's everything that she's getting now and everything that I'm, reaping because of that lady. It's because of our hard work and the dedication that Madam Scott started, but now my mother's continuing. So once again, I just truly appreciate it, and I just cannot wait to share, this great, this story with the people that really need to hear it, which is, my generation. So thank you.
I went to school with one of your board members. I'm just looking at your board.
Wait.
She actually helped me pick my middle name when I changed my name. I haven't seen her in years. That's interesting. I'm really loving this.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
We have some great board members. We have Miles Berger. We have Pamela Jones, who's the vice president. We have Anthony Smith, who's a part of, the Lincoln Park Music Festival. So we have some great people on here. Great people that are on here. I can't say enough about the board, the advisory council that my mother picked out. It's like she just went in a hat and just started blinding, picking people in, because she's so connected with God, she picked the right people.
Great Melissa Josie.
Well, I hope to see you all on the 14th, on the 15th.
On the
So
15th,
June
yeah.
15th, June 15th. So please come out.
And very quickly, favorite hip hop artist, individual or group. We're running right into the next segment. We have our guest here. Just real quick, let us know.
Oh, come on, y'all gonna slander me because I'm a part of a whole nother generation, man.
No, not at all. Not unless you say
Go ahead, Levar. We gotta do it.
The only one would be like, if you say future, but no, I'm kidding.
I'll get J. Cole. That's my favorite of my generation. J. Cole.
That's a great one. Everybody loves him. He's like, the older generation loves him. The younger generation loves him. Yeah, I mean, everybody.
That's a good pick, Levar. We with that.
That's a safe pick, man.
He's playing ball now, but
How about you, Nicholas?
So you all gonna hate me. I'm not the biggest hip hop person. I am a gospel lover. I love classical music. So, but if I had to pick somebody, I'm just gonna say Biggie.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank
you. Very much love having you on.
And
we'll have you on again, and we'll see you soon.
I hope so. God bless. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a blessed weekend. Thank you.
Welcome to All Politics to Local, another getting ready for that for our next segment. And Zayid, I think we are officially on the vote, and we have a wonderful guest who is with us. Zayid, do you want to do that introduction?
Yes,
because Zayid can do some introduction.
With Charlene for Charlene's benefit. Charlene, you've been on the show before, haven't you?
Actually, I haven't. I don't believe.
Okay, wow. Now you probably know you with us would say the name. That's you really went on this particular venue. But anyway, this segment is a segment where we're actually talking about important developments in electoral politics for our community. But we've got something else to talk about. That should be one of the driving engines of what we need to be doing with electoral politics at this critical moment. Charlene is a top-notch young organizer that I'm very proud of. She's the executive director of Faith in New Jersey, a statewide organization that organizes clergy to be activists, right, and community supporters that are comfortable in working in that kind of paradigm. She just made a sojourn to Buffalo in the aftermath of that horrific massacre of our folks in Buffalo, and I wanted to make sure we got somebody that could give us a firsthand take of just what's going on up there. I have my hands in several different fires, trying to get several different folks from several different perspectives, from up there. But Charlene was there, and she was going to not come on today because she was trying to bring somebody else in from Buffalo on with her, and they couldn't. Like I said, come anyway, right?
Absolutely, come
anyway. Your perspective matters. Your observations matter to us, right? So, Charlene, welcome to All Politics Are Local. Before you go into Buffalo, I want you to tell everybody about Faith in New Jersey. I want folks to appreciate your work, and then let's talk about your trip.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. So, yes, I'm the executive director of Faith in New Jersey, which is a statewide organizing entity. And we organize not just faith leaders, we organize entire faith communities. We believe that people of faith are called to step into the public square to actually make a moral mandate for justice to build a beloved community. So we work on things like police brutality. We run one of the largest electoral civic engagement campaigns in the nation. We are part of the Faith in Action national, now global organizing network, which is the largest faith-based organizing entity in the country that organizes not just in the US, but also in El Salvador, soon to be Ghana, Rwanda, Haiti, Honduras, and Mexico. So we are very, very busy. Let's see. To start with a little bit about, do you want me to just jump in with what?
No, take a beat, because you hit it quick,
Yeah.
But you said something that I want you to also lift up that really warms my heart to hear when it comes from your generation, right? You made a reference to the beloved community. Now, a bunch of folks don't know what the hell that is, but it's important that they do. See, I'm probably, me and maybe Ed are probably the only ones on this call who were alive when Dr. King was last alive. So the responsibility of that man's legacy, ultimately falls on our generation in a very unique way, right? And folks should understand what the idea or the notion of a beloved community is, and why that's important to be something to fight for and to stand for and to trying to make happen. So take a minute, take a beat, and just tell an audience of young heads. This is a community-based hip hop talk show. Just what is that? What is the beloved community, right? And then let's come back to your trip, and let's get into that.
Yeah, so when I think about beloved community, what I think about is really like we're a power building organization also. So what I really think about is building a world, not a world that's free from conflict, but a world where we can have a multiracial democracy where everybody has the opportunity to actually thrive. And to live out their dreams. And what I like to say is to live the long lives that they choose without being subjected to white supremacy and anti-Blackness, and where people actually have a sense of belonging and that we belong to each other. And we start to see our common dignity and humanity that moves us to really act together, and where we get rid of this idea of like this zero-sum game where it's like, well, a lot of times people say that equality is not pie, right? It's not like, well, you can do well for one person or one group of people and then it takes away from everyone else. It's this idea that we're in this together. And what does it really mean to love thy neighbor? It means to make sure that your neighbor has access to clean water and adequate housing and lack of fear of being, thrown into a carceral system that doesn't love us, to make sure that everybody has access to affordable health care, that we are free from militarization, that we are free from this capitalist state that just drives us and only sees us as beings that produce and nothing more, but that we can actually love each other and build something better together. That's what I think of when I think of beloved community. It's really guided by love for each other and seeing each other as human. I don't know what you want to add to that.
No, yeah, but I mean, so I'm going back in the time when I asked that question, because those of us who are all in on that on another level. The two pillars of social and economic justice, and the third, of course, is peace. Right, the opposite of the racism, the militarism, and the poverty that Dr. King was driving at in those last days of his life. So you contemporize it. That's cool.
I try my best to make it so that our folks get it. Right?
Yeah. Tell us about your trip. Tell us what you saw, who you were with, how folks are doing up there. Make it plain. Absolutely. What's going on? What we dealing with up there?
So I mentioned that we're part of the National Faith in Action Network. So actually on the east side of Buffalo, where this incident occurred, our organization is the organization that does the grassroots organizing on the ground. So, and I'm very close with the executive director and the staff there. So I remember that Saturday, I got a text message saying, hey, I'm on my way to Tops. There was just a mass shooting, to go and figure out what happened. The sad part is that of the 10 individuals, I don't know how many people have ever really been to Buffalo. So Buffalo is a place that I've spent a lot of my time in because my great aunt lived there. I went to school up in Syracuse. That is a grocery store that I have shopped at. It's a grocery store that I know everybody's heard the news that, they're calling it a food desert. It's not a food desert, it's food apartheid. A desert is natural. This is by design. Right? That they have only this one major grocery store that's in this area, a grocery store that sells poor quality food, a grocery store where the prices are hyped up because this is the Black section of town, a grocery store where you go and you pay your bills, a grocery store that has a bank, that has access to this one bank, which now is down. And of the people that were unfortunately lost their lives in this area, Buffalo is a very tight-knit community, so everyone knows somebody. And our organization is actually connected to 7 of the victims. And our executive director, Reverend Denise Walden Glenn, was on the ground and actually went with the FBI and police to give all of the notices to those that were lost, and has been walking with every last victim's family throughout this entire tragedy. The community is hurting. It's really extremely heartbreaking because everyone is clear about this is no surprise. This did not happen in a bubble. Buffalo for years has been facing extreme racism, people that are outright white supremacists that serve on their law enforcement. Their holding cell, the Erie County holding cell, has people dying left and right. Is one of the most dangerous holding cells in the country. And currently, there are actual white supremacists walking through Buffalo, taking pictures of Black people and following them through their whereabouts right now. It is a scary time to be on the ground in Buffalo. And when everything happened, the immediate reaction was increased policing.
Hold on, stop for a second. Because there's some stuff that you said that I just never heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Are you telling me
that ain't in the media?
Right. Are you telling me right now there are white supremacists following Black people around in Buffalo? Like, this is like things you've seen on the ground.
This is what is being reported, that people are being followed and pictures are being taken.
But where do you, like, when you say be reported, can you just elaborate?
These are actual people that are trusted, that are reported. There's increased security that will be around Black folks right now, and there's a lot of tension. One of the things I think people also don't understand is that Buffalo has the third largest Juneteenth celebration in the country. So right now there's even more concerns, and also there are outside of those concerns and with the being followed, there's just a lot of distrust that people are getting telephone calls and bomb threats. The weekend after that Monday, the schools started getting bomb threats. I forget what the name of the center is, a place that was providing temporary supports, got a bomb threat. There's constant telephone calls and threats that are coming in to places within the community. So it's really important right now for a community to stay together. And I know people want to rush up there and want to be able to be of assistance, but right now they need to see faces that they know, right? In order to remain safe, feel safe, and to be able to start to address the harm and the trauma that's being experienced.
Let me ask you something. Hold on, man. How would we address it? How is the question of the community security being addressed in response to these threats? I gotta have military discussion with you now.
Community is staying close knit. I don't want to go into like what it looks like, but I would say that the community has their own strategies to stay together, to not be out by themselves, to always travel in groups, in order to be as safe as possible.
Let me just say this too. You mentioned that and this is not something to sneeze at, that Buffalo has the third largest Juneteenth celebration in the country. New York and New Jersey are important to Juneteenth. Why? People, the narrative is that General Granger came in and said, "You guys are free. I'm sorry they didn't tell you," and everything just goes away. No. General Granger came in with a squad of Black troops from New York and New Jersey. Black folks got that order. They heard the general, but they were looking at all those Black men in uniform, saying that they were free and was that, I forget the term, absolute free. There's a term that's in the document, right? So that's nothing at all to sneeze about as Juneteenth develops its own steam. That's history that's important, and that's a kind of space and time and celebration that should have sacred dimensions, I would dare say, right? So I raise security concerns. That's my background, and I'm like, and so I hope folks are just prepared, know. And this is why this is important for a lot of reasons, right? One, it's our folks. Two, we cannot allow this to go any further, right? Several things. This little knucklehead that did this mess had 3 other cities in his sights. They were all Jersey cities. Jersey City, Toms River, and Lakewood. In his sights. It's this whole notion of him acting alone. All these threats are not coming from this one lone little cracker, right? The right wing is dangerously organized and mobilized, and if they get to, and some of them are crazy enough to think that they can start the kind of stuff that happened in the last quarter of the 19th century that destroyed and overthrew our people's presence in government and in control of their own lives at the end of Reconstruction. Reconstruction wasn't just lost by virtue of a deal between 2 crackers arguing over who's going to be president in the close race. There was a military removal or withdrawal of protection of our community that let those folks in the South go buck wild at our folks with the Klan and et cetera, right? These folks, if they, the question of our people taking our community self-defense seriously is something that we all need to be raising. And one of the reasons that we're having this National Black Political Convention 2022 anniversary is because at the heart of this is the ballot is under siege, right? The ballot is under siege. And there 19 states have come up with a plethora of laws to gut Black and brown people's access to the ballot so these crazy white folks can take back the White House and the Congress, starting with the Congress this year in 2022. They do not see anything wrong with happened in Washington in January 6th, right? Partisan politics, they're calling the Investigation Act. This is not a time for sideline politics or playing it safe or I don't feel like voting in here. I don't trust none of that. No, a lot is on the line. More is on the line for our people since we got the ballot coming out of 1965.
Kaleena,
I just want folks to understand the context of how this took place. And this did not happen in Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia and Kentucky. Buffalo is in New York.
But I think that all too often people point and look at Buffalo, we look at the South, we look at all these places, but I think there's a lot of naivety to what's happening in New Jersey.
My point exactly, baby. Go ahead, talk.
Because there are tons of bills that are constantly being put up that are testing to show us what will happen if certain people get power.
Like Westfield. The Westfield Board of Education.
Tony Morrison.
No, I just threw that out as an example. The Westfield Board of Education, as in they're protesting Toni Morrison. They're like just, there's certain critical race theory. I am interested in, Kaleena, what are you thinking about this conversation, right? Like I saw a reaction on your face too when our guest, Charlene Walker, talked about, the stalking that's taking place. And how this is clearly not, I thought it was individual gunmen that I did not know that there was still this thing going on.
Well, that's how they work. They are in community and in conversation with each other all of the time. And so, one person, we see that with the Capitol hearing, right? Like there was an insurrection. It didn't happen. They're organized and they're organized above, the radar of regular communication. They have their own ways of talking to each other. And so when things happen, they are organized enough where if you do something in Buffalo, we know that we got to continue that work. We got to continue to apply pressure. We got to continue to have our presence now. So I'm not surprised about that. The sad thing for me is one, that we're not talking about Buffalo anymore. 10 people were murdered doing something that all of us do every single day, go into the supermarket to shop, and they were killed. And I don't know the stories of the victims. I don't know what's happening in the community. So that's what I want to know, Charlene. Like, what is, are there who are the people? If you know any of their, stories or what they represented, were they employees? Were they, nearby residents? Like, who were they? And then how is the community doing? Are people staying in the house? Are they fearful? Are they healing? Like, how are the people of that community?
It's a lot. Everybody is really struggling. So one of the things that we were doing when we were up there was they're trying to provide supports to survivors. There's a lot. First of all, there's a lot of survivor's remorse. This happened on a Saturday. I met with and talked to several people and just sat there and hugged them because they were crying because they could not understand why they weren't where they normally are on a Saturday to have met the same fate.
Right.
So there's a lot of survivor's remorse. There's a lot of people who aren't coming out of their house. I think more coming out now since a lot of the camera crews have left, because when all of this happened, it became an area that had an abundance of policing. Mind you, this is a community that already is over-policed, a community where traffic stops lead to people being
over-policed.
Yeah.
Over-policed, and this happened in an over-policed community?
Exactly. And over-policed in a community that experiences police brutality. I've heard stories of people getting traffic stops and thrown on the ground. So that's a lot of the shock and disbelief to see how this gunman was able to be taken so quietly. Also, when people know that, well, I got stopped and got thrown on the ground and handcuffed, but this person had a gun and just shot and killed 10 of my neighbors.
Right.
Many of the some of the people that were that lost their lives were pillars in the community. One was an older woman that was an activist.
Cat Cassidy.
Huh?
Catherine Cassidy.
And then there was Mother Ruth and Pearl that were both really active within their congregations that did food pantries. There was a woman, Roberta, who had moved back to Buffalo to be with her brother and to support him. Just all of the stories. There is a young man who lost his father, and his mom is ill and can't be like really out and about. It's just so sad. But one of the most horrible things in order to be able to survive and go through this is the lack of mental health services that are culturally competent.
Right.
There are a lot of people that were on the ground that do not know the Black experience, right? So the need for cultural competent healing is really important, and healing long-term for the entire community, because it is the entire community that is hurt. There's also, unfortunately, I recently found out that they are pushing to open up this grocery store by the end of next month. When the community does not want it open. The community is like, make it a memorial. Give us options to open up our own grocery stores through grants or whatever else is possible. Let us have the same food co-ops that are on the other side of town, right? They want those options, but to be forced to walk back in that grocery store, one, is completely disrespectful, because they know if it would have happened on another area of Erie County that was predominantly white, they would not be forced to walk back into that store where their neighbors laid on the ground and died, right? And then there's this push, you mentioned about Buffalo not being in the media anymore. One of the things that we work on in Voice Buffalo as well is around our work around gun violence, right? The conversation has pivoted to this idea of mass shootings in the realm of schools, right?
Right.
About 0.3%, I believe, of the I think it's 0.03%, when most gun violence that harms and kills our people is what we would classify as intercommunal violence, right? And that's not being addressed. Yes, we want the restrictions on people being able to buy AR-15s, but most importantly, we need money to go to community-based interventions for harm reduction and wraparound services and mental health care, if we are going to start to heal our communities. Which I just really want to lift up, because that's one of the things that we're working on in New Jersey, is that, believe it or not, Senator Booker has what can be a bipartisan solution to gun violence, called the Breaking the Cycle of Violence Act, that our Live Free team helped to actually write. And it's imperative that we get more of our members of Congress to co-sponsor this piece of legislation, because it actually provides money to those on the ground that are in Black and brown communities doing this great work that actually works. And it also provides help for mental health that actually goes into the communities that have been traumatized, like a Buffalo, like a Newark, like a Trenton, that we really need to get past.
So no, Kaleena, you were saying?
No, I said I have to look into that. I had not heard about that from Senator Booker.
Yeah, what's the bill? What can you tell us about the bill?
It's called the Breaking the Cycle of Violence Act, and it provides, I believe it's $5 billion over 10 years plus.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I think it's $250,000 a year that also goes towards the mental health supports, and that's things like therapeutic services, and healing and restorative justice practices for our actual communities.
And Jonathan, he's long overdue to be on the show. And am I right or wrong? Is Jonathan on?
Yeah,
right. He's overdue to be on the show, so we need to snatch him up too. Yeah.
So I really do want to lift up that one of the things that they are asking for up there is really to end the food apartheid and ensure affordable, quality healthcare, food access, and then to really be able to dismantle all of the racial disparities up there. There are so many. And one of the things that I think goes back to when we start talking about voting, that was extremely jarring for me when I was up there was, on Friday, we had planned a press conference, and then that evening we were doing a community healing event. The city council chose on that Friday, the day that the first funeral started to occur, to push through a city budget.
Wow.
This budget gave $5.5 million, I believe,
to the police, right?
To the police.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a proposal to implement something called ShotSpotter, which is a technology that harms our communities. It provides mics, like actual microphones, all over the community. Luckily, that part was not passed. However, there is a move to still bring it in the community through a federal grant.
I believe we have that in Newark.
We do.
With the ShotSpotter?
Yeah, I remember reading about it. I remember they're actually all around the city there in terms of what's going on now.
Yeah, and that's something that ACLU has spoken out about several times. People have been killed with ShotSpotter. But these are the things that are happening while the community looks one way. Those that do not have the best interest are trying to do other things.
Doing other things.
And that's the importance of people remaining civically engaged and really paying attention to what is going on in our communities.
Because it seems like what you're telling me is that this community they're in is an apartheid community anyway. Like when I'm going to pass through a budget, when I know people are grieving and go to a first funeral, like when I do that, when I don't, like everybody should have been at that first funeral. Everybody should have been at some funeral, right? Like you have some type, and it's the first one, right? Nah, that shows a certain sense of contempt, disregard, like viciousness. That is where they live right now. So does the community what we were seeing in Buffalo, that a community that was already in an apartheid state, already like feeling put upon, attacked, that they are already on the outskirts and fighting for some basic recognition, right? And this happens to them, and that actually is why the insult of him being taken alive. I was wondering about that. I was like, are these cops just really good, or they just
body
really
armor.
jack up black people.
Yeah, body armor. Body armor that's supposed to be exclusively available to military and law enforcement.
Yeah, but even if you look at when they did the special, I forget what it was called. It wasn't a arraignment. It was a procedural hearing that happened initially. Like they made sure that it didn't feel like a welcoming space for those that had been harmed, and it was set up in such a way where people were intimidated because of the amount of law enforcement, and it felt like that law enforcement was there to protect the person that had perpetrated this horror instead of protecting the families that were there.
Well, I'm going to ask this question, and that question is, there's been reports all over the country about, Klansmen, white supremacists joining the police force. That's been reported by the FBI since like Obama was in office. Eric Holder put out a report about that, talking about in the military and the police that there are more white supremacists that are growing there. Given how you describe the community, are there just basically, I'm asking a question, are there white supremacists in the police force and that actually sympathize with this person? Like, can we say, are people thinking that? Yeah. Are people like, is that a palpable thought that you didn't shoot him because he was one of your brothers?
Absolutely. There had been calls of white supremacists being on the force prior to this, years prior, which is why they had one of their largest civic engagement campaigns the year prior to try to ensure that the sheriff was replaced because of the calls and the almost out front knowledge of people's roles within white supremacy groups. And one of the saddest things in this country is that although we know, and this report came out years ago saying that there are white supremacists on law enforcement, there are no laws that outlaw racist cops and racist law enforcement on record. There's nothing that says that you cannot be racist and be a police officer, be a person of the law. There's nothing that actively is seeking out and monitoring their devices, their social media with a good course of action for somebody that displays this. And that's one of the things that we actually need in this country as well.
Make it plain. And when Mayor Ras Baraka made such a proclamation here in Newark, folks thought he was, folks in their cynical selves, totally out of their African minds without any goddamn history, were making like he was grandstanding. No, it was a reason why he did that, right? Mm-hmm. No police force is immune from that kind of development because that's how they get down.
Right.
That's how they build police forces. Los Angeles Police Department was built in the 50s and the 60s, recruiting from Mississippi, recruiting from Georgia, recruiting from Louisiana, recruiting folks who had that Klan military background. That's how they built their police force. And folks, why it went up the way it did in 65 and 92, went up with good reasons because they had been treated brutally by folks who were built for acting like that.
But Charlene, I just want to ask you a question before you go. You know, you just came from a heavy place and dealing with a lot of sadness and a lot of frustration and trauma, and that's a heavy load to carry. And now I assume you're back at home in New Jersey. How are you doing? How are you coping? How are those of you that are doing this work? You know, it's one thing to do the work when there's a community, like the whole world is, like in Uvalde, the whole world is watching, everyone is keeping up to date, it's all over, there are hearings, it's everywhere. But when you're doing this work in a silo where it's just you and the people of that city, and y'all are, you know, being there to comfort them and to help them to organize, how are you guys doing, and what are you doing to take care of yourself?
Hugely important question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one, I'm going to keep it real. I have not fully processed everything. It took a while also when I came back from from Kentucky with Breonna Taylor, with that community as well. It takes a minute to process everything.
That's what we had you on, say their names. Yes, that guy.
Yeah, it takes a minute to be able to process everything. But the one great thing is that self-care and rest is revolutionary. But there is a community of organizers, and I will say for us in the Voice Buffalo staff, being part of a national network, we are intentional about having spaces like our Black Caucus, which brings together Black organizers from across the country, where we actually do self-care together. And find time to reflect, and then also being able to lend a hand with each other. Like when I was up there helping with organizing plans, because I could see a little bit clearer, not being in the middle of it, and being able to do that, and all of us being able to rotate. So we will be going in and out of Buffalo for the next year at least, and providing supports for faith leaders up there, and to prevent burnout, and to even deal with the trauma, because even since there has been some losses of life due to typical circumstances and other forms, but it's like this constant cycle of trauma. So you have to take time, you have to be in community, and you have to know when you can take some time to yourself, and just try and just let it all down.
That's one of the things that I'm especially proud of your generation. And Kaleena, that's you asking that question is reflective of what I'm talking about. Y'all have a health consciousness that our generation didn't do too good with. I have to bear witness. There's a lot of folks in my generation are not here as a consequence. Just not here, right? So that is really important to do. In our next segment, we're going to build on this because we've got our Office of Violence Prevention coming on behind you, right, to help build on what that looks like locally for us as well. So that question is hugely important. Now, somebody just popped into this circle. We got to.
Yes, we should introduce.
He's one of the few that's healthy.
Fair.
Oh, he is. Yes.
Just
somebody is old black ass could outrun a deer.
Fair enough. Walked all the way to Trenton. Right. Yeah. So welcome, Larry Hamm, a hero to not just our city, but I believe all over the nation. Legendary activist from the time he was 16 years old, and the chairman of People's Organization for Progress. And I was talking about you with Ed maybe last week, maybe a few days ago, right? And when it came up that all the time I've known you, I think that when I saw you speak at the Model Black Gary convention was the first time I saw you on stage speaking, right? Like, and I was like, wow, that's why people like Larry. Wow. Like, I'm no lie, man. I mean, like the way you just were thorough, thoughtful, moving, inspiring, like it was like watching a movie and a speech. And I was like a great movie and a speech, like directed by, like this great director just capturing you and getting you like Steven Spielberg style, man. I was like, wow.
Absolutely.
So welcome.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. But you got a full house here tonight, and you got great panelists on. I have the highest respect for Sister Charlene and Sister Kaleena and Brother Zayid. Y'all was really chopping it up. I couldn't participate early, but I was eavesdropping. While I was eavesdropping as a viewer, but I was kind of tied up and couldn't jump in. But I'm here now, and you're right on target with what you were saying about Buffalo, and I'm really informed because I didn't hear that part, but I gather, Charlene, that you were there in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And because you spoke with authority, like you were there.
Yeah. I was there them every day. So.
Yes. Well, I was very impressed by your remarks, and I think that I think that we're in some kind of low-level civil war here. They won't call it that,
Yeah.
But when you look at the number of casualties, there already have been more than 270 mass shootings this year in 2022. That's more mass shootings than there are days in the year. We're averaging, and when I say we, I'm talking about the United States. The United States is averaging now 2 mass shootings a day. And no other country on the face of the planet Earth has this problem to this degree like the United States. And I think Charlene and you and Kaleena and Zayid pointed out the racist roots of this. I mean, this goes all the way back to the beginnings of this settler colonial project.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, people don't want to do it, but you really can't paint a complete picture unless you go back to the beginning. This is a country that was founded on the most horrific types of violence imaginable. You know, the near extermination of the indigenous people to take their land, and the murder and torture and terror of African people who had to be enslaved to work the land. You could not do those two things without violence. You know, I think, Zayid, correct me if I'm wrong, our brother, then known as A-Trap Brown, yes, used to say violence was as American as apple pie.
You actually said cherry pie, but it's the same damn thing.
And we see this is being borne out today. I want you to know that I have asked the governor the day that Buffalo happened. I communicated with the governor and said, and this was by written communication, that New Jersey should convene some type of statewide conference on racist terrorist violence and take the appropriate steps now to prevent what happened in Buffalo. I don't know if it can be prevented, but you don't want to sit around and wait till something happens and then decide to do something. Because this year, the New Jersey office, there is a New Jersey Office of Homeland Security.
Yes, there is.
And the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security said the #1 threat to public safety in this state is white racist domestic terrorism. Now, that's the state of New Jersey talking. That's not Zayid talking, or, you know, one of the activists. And if they know this to be true and we don't do anything, then, you know, what shall we say after it happens?
In New Jersey, do we have anything that vets police officers for white supremacist affiliation?
No.
Is there anything that even talks about or addresses this? Because I think that, like Charlene, what you said was that was just gripping, was because it just had to be asked, right? Like, is it believed that there are white supremacists in the police force? And you were like, yeah, that's actually been a controversy since before this. And when you see what happened, and you see that they brutalize Black people who are unarmed, and dude in body armor gets like it's almost like, is there a code? Is there like what is? And if the thing in New Jersey is there is a, like, it is the #1 threat, isn't there a real question about law enforcement, that right-wing violence? Am I asking the wrong question? Am I asking questions that are just rude?
But it's in every instance. White supremacists running schools and white supremacists running hospitals. I mean, the violence against people of color is more dominant and being, we experience it more, the largest in the educational system, because more people are impacted by violence against people of color through the educational system that is run by white supremacists. And then hospitals and healthcare is run by white supremacists. It's everywhere. We can see it easier because it results in loss of life when it comes to the criminal justice system. But every system has this problem, and every system is inflicting violence on predominantly Black people, but people of color in general. And if we start to realize that and think about it, all of it is the same thing, and it's all just as dangerous.
Interestingly, let's come back to your point, Adim, was this. One, last year, it was not just the year of racial reckoning and the George Floyd response, and our state legislature did nothing. What New Jersey should have did, in addition to enacting all those bills that we put forward, right? Last year was the centennial of racial profiling as we know it. Born and bred right here in New Jersey.
Right.
If New Jersey was half as liberal and informed and cosmopolitan and tolerant as they say it is, and that's what those folks who are in leadership say they are, there should have been a national summit to unpack that history, right? Comparable to what you're talking about before this happened, Adim, right? Comparable to what you're talking about, to unpack this history and to put forward, to be the launching pad, to put forward for the kind of legislative change that we need to be seeing. It did not happen. Now, in response to what you did, because you did a press conference, also you just send a letter, you did a press conference, put this thing on blast, right? On the 21st, right here in Newark, the new Attorney General is supposed to be hosting a town hall combating bias, hate, and violence, and it's really the way they get down. And I've been watching. I've been trying to pay attention to how this Attorney General's situation gets down. They have these listening sessions, it's 10 o'clock, and it's going to be locally at the 15 Washington Street at the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Hall at Rutgers on the 10th. Cookie Rivera has it up on the Integrated Justice Alliance Facebook page. She just shared that with us a few hours ago. So that needs to be packed, and we need to be noisy as hell about that, and laying out the kind of things that we want to see before we even walk in the door.
Right. I believe they did that in response to the request that I sent to the governor.
That's what I'm talking about. That's precisely what I'm talking
about. But I want to go back and we got to make sure, Zayid, that everybody that needs to be in that conference is in that conference. But starting with Jonathan and Kaleena and Charlene and everybody they think need to be in the conference. But I just want to step back for a second and say also that the FBI 2 years ago, or was it? Yeah, 2 years ago. In fact, in 20 and in 21, testified before Congress and said that law enforcement at all levels in the United States has been infiltrated by white supremacists. Now that's according to the FBI. None of this is a secret. And last night, the Congressional Committee on the January 6th attack on the Capitol talked about the violent, the attempted violent overthrow of the U.S. government. A number of active and retired law enforcement officials from New Jersey. In fact, just about a month ago, they indicted a sheriff's deputy for being involved in the attack on the Capitol. I heard a statistic that 1 in 7 of the people that attacked the Capitol were either active or retired military and police. So there's a fascist movement in this country. Now, what's very interesting.
To add to your point, Larry,
go ahead.
I just pulled up an article from PBS from 2016. Right. And the
2016
article, right? And
they came out with it strong after.
It says FBI warned of white supremacists and law enforcement 10 years ago. Has anything changed? And this is from 2016, and they're like, the FBI warned about it in 2005.
Right. But it's white supremacists, so no action need to be taken. If it was black supremacists, 800 of us would be serving prison.
I'd be in jail. That's right.
And the FBI is run
half
by
of
white
us would be
supremacists.
dead. Half would be dead and half would be in prison. You know, it's crazy. You know, they've known about this problem for half a century. When McVeigh bombed the federal building in Oklahoma City.
Let him get talked about. He took a building
and killed 186 people. The FBI came out with a report then that said there were 250 white supremacist organizations dedicated to the violent overthrow of the United States government. That was then, but no action taken. In fact, when the FBI came out with another report, I guess, Jonathan, that was around 2016, somewhere around that time, came out with the Congress rejected it. It said that the FBI had to go back and do their report over because they didn't believe the information that was in there. You know, we're faced with a challenge today unlike any other that this country has faced since the last time there was an attempted coup in the United States. And look at this. When it first happened, there was a big debate about whether or not they should use the word coup. Anybody remember that? Well, it wasn't a debate last night because the brother that's chairing the January 6th committee in his opening remarks said an attempted coup in the United States. Now, this is the second time. The first time was in 1933 when a group of right-wing capitalists, which I believe included Prescott Bush, the great-grandfather of George Bush, when they attempted to recruit a three-time Congressional Medal of Honor Marine, Smedley Butler, to lead a march on the capital of the United States to seize the government. They tried to recruit him to do it, thinking that, you know, he would be down with them, but he turned around and testified before Congress and exposed them. You can look this up. This is not secret. This is not Masonic history here. You can look it up, you know, and this thing is serious. I mean, they going in black people's church. They going in our churches, shooting us in church, shooting us in school, shooting us in the supermarket, shooting us in the train. You know, I just don't understand.
Give us more police that don't protect us.
That's right.
And
we're being policed by the people who are shooting us. You know, it's madness. It's some kind of madness that has, you know, I used to read about when we were in like elementary school and high school, when we had social studies, you know, they would tell us about Hitler. And I'm like, if this person was so evil, how could an evil person like this get power? How could that happen? How could he become the leader? Because remember, Hitler didn't seize power. Hitler was elected. He was elected chancellor. You know, the name Fuhrer is a real government title that they gave to him because they combined the office of the chancellor and the president, and that became the Fuhrer. He became, in essence, the dictator, you know, of Germany. But he was elected. He did not. There was not a military coup. He was elected. So here we have, for the first time that we know of in history, you know, somebody, the president, trying to overthrow the government. But coming back to
I just looked at the article you talked about in terms of the business plot. This is from Rolling Stone magazine from January 2022 that starts to talk about what you just said just now. And they're like, it's not taught in schools, but Major General Smedley Butler addresses nearly 1,600 veteran bonus marchers camped in Washington, D.C., July 20th, 1932. Smedley urged them to stay until the bonus has been paid. Wow.
It's deep. Yeah. It's deep what's going on. And we really, we need unity in the Black community. And we need to come up, you know, with our own comprehensive kind of approach to this because
why
you know what they're trying to do. They're not satisfied. You know, this is not just about banning Black history. All of this is related. Overturning Roe, critical race theory. And when they finish with Roe, remember, Roe also involves privacy decisions. They're going to overthrow anything. Their aim is to overthrow Brown v. Board of Education. Take my word for it.
Oh, that's on the
Absolutely. That's what Roe versus Wade is about.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, sister. Talk about it.
I'm saying people are talking about Roe versus Wade in the context of abortion. They have significantly polarized people on both sides that people are ignoring what the major issue is. The major issue is the fact that Roe versus Wade leads way for them to put an attack on anything that was that we came about from the 14th Amendment that is not actually enumerated in the 14th Amendment. That means it's not written out plain. Those are things like Roe versus Wade, marriage. So like interracial marriages, it's not enumerated. So this is an attack on the actual 14th Amendment to roll back the humanity of Black folks, essentially. With Roe versus Wade. And we need to have more of a discussion about that instead of just talking about it from reproductive rights standpoint, because that is the strategy. The strategy is polarize people enough around this idea of reproductive justice that people miss the fact that it's about rolling back rights.
Because ultimately, these things are rooted in privacy rights, right?
Exactly.
And the stuff that led up to Roe v. Wade were court cases about contraception. People were like, nah, you can't use contraception, right? And those are the early those are that right to privacy, right to have the state not come into your own private decisions. I think that we underplay how important that is, and that's integral to Roe v. Wade, is integral to other decisions. But absolutely.
And just to come back to the point I was trying to make earlier in this, before you came on the beam, because you one of the few folks who are still around that was in Gary in '72. One of the reasons why we're doing this 50th anniversary convention is to forge that united front necessary to stay the hand of this reactionary trend, right? To not concede any more ground to the right wing whatsoever, right? And to defend the ballot, of course, to the fullest, right? So folks need to look forward to that. And I'm saying that because I really question how folks get it. I peeked at our page for a little while ago, Jonathan, and I was looking at some of the topics that folks are wanting to present, and it had nothing to do of any urgency with respect to what we're trying to pull together. It was nice stuff, socially relevant stuff, but nothing with the urgency of what we're talking about. So I hope our folks really got to lift their eyes and appreciate what time it is, because we're under fire. We need to be real clear about that. We're under fire.
That's right.
We haven't been since the fight for the ballot in the mid '60s, when we were fighting for the Voting Rights Act.
Right. And I think that especially in light of and I'm a debate coach, right? And the next year's topic deals with NATO and dealing with the United States and their relationship with NATO. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking to a bunch of people about, including Larry, including lots of people who are and historians and political scientists, is that this ain't just the United States. This is like all over, like, democracies that have not dealt with issues of racism and white supremacy, and they're tilting like they can go one way or another, right? So this issue that in the United States of right-wing, anti-immigrant, white supremacist, anti-black, it really is like white people all over the world are like, this might be our last chance. Might be our last
step.
chance.
That's right. The Summit of Americas, right, seeks to ban Cuba and Venezuela, and old Joe Biden, with his half senile self, all due respect, is piling up with Bolsonaro Bolsonaro, the Trump of South America.
Right.
Like that's the best he can do. That's the best that's going on in all of the Americas. Him and Bolsonaro.
And actually, Bolsonaro
Who
is far worse than
him?
Trump. Like he's far worse than Trump in terms of more power.
Oh, your boy.
Right. Like Bolsonaro has talked openly about like killing large parts of his own population. Like he's talked about just straight up doing it. Like Trump has always been like build a wall, and Bolsonaro's like,
yeah,
we need to get rid of some folks, right? Like, I mean, it's that level, right? Like, it's not like he makes like Trump look like, you know, George Bush, or it makes Trump look like, oh, I'm sorry, like Bill Clinton, right? And that Trump Bill Clinton probably is real, right? Like, as in, that's how far out Bolsonaro is, in that he openly just talks about murder.
And our folks need to understand why that's important also, because Brazil has the largest African population in the Americas.
Yeah, well, actually, anywhere in the world outside of Africa, right? Like Brazil has the largest population of Black people in the world of any place outside of Africa.
That's right.
But we live in such an interesting time, and people are, we're so distracted. It's like all of this stuff is happening. It's real. You all are saying like, look, we're in a major time right now. This is a time we need to be paying attention. We need to be focused. And everybody else is on TikTok, making TikToks, and on Instagram, making reels. And there's an illusion of inclusion and an illusion of progress. And Black people can do this and we can do that. We got charter schools, we getting promotions, we starting businesses. And so there's this dual reality, and how do you begin to get people to wake up and see we're so self-centered at this point that we see beyond ourselves and our phones to the things that are going on around us? How do we?
I heard the Celtic kids heard you.
How do we wake folks up? I have no clue how to wake folks up so that they don't get, they don't fall for the disguise of progress and of safety.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they won't listen until they have to pay $80 to fill up their tank. They will care about that.
Well, we're doing that now.
But that's what I'm saying, right? That's what I'm saying, right? Like, if it doesn't affect them directly, right? Like, if it's not about like, oh my gosh, I'm paying much tithes for gas. It's a very narrow center, as opposed to, and I'm not saying, because I just paid $80 to fill up my tank.
Right.
And I'm like, yo, my gas is starting to be more valuable than my car. But at the same time, right? There's so much going on that we need to be outside of ourselves, and we're not doing it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, look, just 24 months ago, we had the largest mass mobilization of people since the Vietnam War.
Absolutely.
And that was in the aftermath of George Floyd.
Right.
And I think that we're going to have that same kind of mass upsurge again. I don't know. I mean, it may be around police brutality. It may be around mass shootings. I don't know. But one thing is for sure, that when all else fails, conditions will make people wake up and respond.
Right.
And I think what has to happen in the meantime is that we have to that's why this Gary project is so valuable, because it's a step in the right direction. We have to try to get the leadership of all the different organizations together so that when the mass upsurge comes, we have enough cohesion among the leadership so that we can move a large part of that mass in the right direction. And I think that's why the Gary Project and any other effort, I mean, Gary is one, but there'll be other efforts, any effort to try to bring the various groups together you know, of course, our concern would be groups in the Black community because we Black and we live in the community, but we should not limit ourselves. We should be trying to bring together, after we get a certain critical level of unity together in our house, then we should try to build unity with other progressive organizations in other ethnic groups, you know, and racial groups. This is very important because the people who are leading this fascist movement in this country, they really want to try to build an apartheid type. It won't look exactly like South Africa, but it will be apartheid type arrangement where essentially a white minority will be in control. We will have white minority rule here. And this didn't all start with Trump. You know, the difficulty we're having with Trump now is because Trump and those around him began to use the pressure points in the system to accomplish their goals. I mean, now a lot of their stuff was illegal, but it was illegal because they went beyond the boundaries of what the Constitution will actually allow, but they used what was there. I mean, the Constitution itself allows for, first of all, why do we even have an electoral college? That's a formula for disaster right there. You know, we have a national election, but what we do on the second Tuesday of November does not count. What counts is when the 435 electors meet in December. That's who elect the president. That's in the Constitution. Trump didn't make that. That's in the Constitution. So we need to get rid of the electoral college. But this conspiracy that Trump had to recruit alternative electors so that states could throw out the legitimate electors as a result of their elections and put in chosen electors that would vote for Trump. That was a conspiracy, but it's built on a mechanism inside the Constitution. It's there, you know? And if all else fails, remember, if the electoral college is deadlocked, it's thrown, the election is thrown into the House of Representatives. 435 other people. And they choose the president. And it's not based on one congressman, one vote. It's based on one state, one vote. So all the Congress people in the state got to get together and decide what the vote for their state is going to be. And right now, the Republicans control 26 of the 50 states. They either control both houses of the state legislature and the governor's office, or some combination thereof. All of these things they were doing were at least rooted in mechanisms that are in the Constitution. That's part of the danger that people think if we just get rid of Trump, if we just lock Trump, well, Trump should be locked up because he broke the law. But they think that it's over. Man, when Trump is gone, they got 3 other Trumps waiting in the wings. They got DeSantis, they got Abbott, they got worse Trumps waiting in the wings. You know, so it's going to take the broadest possible movement. You know, we're in a very dangerous situation.
Absolutely.
This situation is akin to where the U.S. was, say, around 1938, just before World War II. I mean, there was a worldwide fascist movement. What was it called? It was called the Axis. It was Germany. It was Germany under Hitler, Italy under Mussolini, and Japan under Hirohito. They were all fascist states. Imagine that. And then you had the Allies on the other side, which, when the fighting started, was the US, Britain, and Russia. Just for 4 years, from 1941 to 1945, Russia was our friend, so that we could defeat Hitler. After Hitler was defeated, Russia was our enemy. But look at the situation. I don't mean to go on. I just stop here. But look at the situation in Ukraine. That could lead to world war. Now, Biden just sent over, when Biden made his speech, his State of the Union speech, he said he was only sending defensive weapons over to Ukraine. All of a sudden, they're sending heavy weapons, weapons that could launch rockets
into Russian territory.
Into Russia. What do you think is going to happen if a rocket comes out of Ukraine and hits a Russian city? It's on. Europe is the place where 2 world wars started. Europe. And now here we are back in Europe again. And this time the combatants all have nuclear weapons.
Right.
And if there's a nuclear war, the living who survive it will envy the dead.
Right. I think that is a chilling segue into our next segment.
Talking about all this white on white violence.
Oh, that white on white violence that will bleed over in everybody else, because that like there are really serious, like really plausible existential scenarios that are just there, like that didn't exist 80 years ago.
We can compound that, because then Biden goes over to the Pacific and start talking about he's gonna defend Taiwan. The Chinese say, okay, be careful what you ask for.
But there,
you ain't learning what's going on in Ukraine.
Right. And so it's funny because we look at things globally and we look at all of the different violence that is going on and the potential for violence that's going on. And one of the things that I was told, and was a book that came out, but I kind of figured this out. I mean, I kind of realized, kind of got this before, is that, when they look at foreign policy and different people, playground politics is very similar. Local politics is very similar. Local communities are very similar. And, globally, we need some anti-violence and some violence prevention. And so this is a perfect time to bring in somebody who understands violence prevention. And welcome.
Y'all ain't gonna put
Keesha
trying
Eure.
to save Ukraine on my daughter now.
So welcome, Keesha Eure, Executive Director of Newark's Office of Violence Prevention, and actually a national figure and leader in the type of work that's going on.
Right.
Like, you're influencing. I would not be surprised if at some point in the very near future you're testifying before Congress about some of the stuff that's been going on in Newark, because so many different people are trying to copy the different things that are going on, which you got from other places, and you looked at. I've been an admirer of yours over the years. Very much an admirer of your work. I think your work saves lives. I think that the way you think about things and the way that you educate people about things as part of a larger community of folks just is invaluable. So welcome, Keesha Eure.
Thank you for having me on the show once again. Thank you. All politics are local. All politics are local. I heard Larry going off, giving his spiel and giving the history and teaching. And I'm like, they don't need me on here. Larry can continue to go. So certainly thank you for always having me on. And as we segue into, like you said, violence, right? And we have this increase in violence and an uptick in violence nationally, right? While we can see and certainly talk about the mass shootings and all of the towns that are happening, more so it's like back to back that our federal government is like bewildered by it and don't even know what to say and do. And us locally, we're like, okay, we have shootings often, but they're not mass shootings with 10 and 15 people being injured and harmed and shot with these weapons that are like highly militarized. And so, yes, we have an increase in violence nationally with our mass shootings, but we have an increase in violence among our youth and young people just nationally beyond that as well in the city.
So what is, I know that Ed and I were talking before the show, and Ed talked about a young woman who was recently killed, and that their community, it seems like there's a lot more stress and anxiety about violence at multiple levels, from fights that take place in schools. And I hear this from teachers, that more fights are taking place in places where, that would be small, but now they're bigger, right?
Right.
So there are a lot more tension. There's a lot more violence. The violence is at younger ages. Can you talk to the expansion of different levels of violence? Is it our imagination? Are people actually younger engaged in violence? What is the problem, the evolving problem as you see it right now, specifically in our city?
Specifically in our city, well, and then we even go global, right? As what Larry was talking about, that we live in a violent nation, right? And so, but even talking about, citywide, and I always say violence is about power and control, right? Violence is about respect. And so what is it that you're trying to gain respect about? What is it that we are trying to control? Like, what is it? And so ultimately, a lot of it is about identity. Who you are? What are you fighting for? Right? The underlying issues, not necessarily the act itself. And so when we see a lot of the shootings and different things, a lot of times violence is about poverty, right? And so we have an increase in our stolen cars. And we saw that even last year and probably the years before that, they were stealing these cars and they was getting money. It was like an organized crime ring around the money that they were getting for these cars. So they're getting $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a car.
Oh,
and
wow.
Here I come saying, hey, I have an Earn to Learn program. I could teach you life skills. I can, give you $15 an hour. And I can't compete with $5,000 an hour, 2 hours that it takes for them to steal a car and sell them. Right. And so there's an organized crime ring around stolen cars, increasing stolen cars. And then there's violence that takes place as a result of this organized crime ring. And that's some of the things that are happening. In the city, we had 2 days ago, we did have a 17-year-old who was shot and killed, female. The same day or night, we had the domestic violence situation in Irvington, the murder-suicide. Woman was shot by her boyfriend, and then he shot himself, and there were children involved. Mm-hmm. And so some of these are crimes of passion, some of these are crimes of emotion, some of these are crimes of being at the wrong place at the wrong time, whatever it is. And as I look on the internet and social media, they're showing these young kids with guns. The access that they have to guns is the real conversation. Where is all of this access coming from? How do they have so much access? How are they getting these guns here? Like, that's the real conversation around the access to firearms.
On that question, Keesha, about the access to firearms, New Jersey has some of the most stringent laws on firearms in the country, right? Like if you're Black, you can't get a legal firearm, right? Like if you're in Newark, I mean, it is difficult, right? Like the as in legally, like the process, the laws are stringent. It's not like the South where you can just go into Walmart and buy a gun. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, it's kind of like that law of we want what you can't have, right? So the more you say no, the more they say yes. The more we tighten the laws, the more they find ways to get around them. And so while New Jersey has some of the strictest gun laws, we still have, violence and gun violence, at a high, probably not as much as other states, but we still have it. And so it's comparable. We have our police department who are taking guns off the streets left and right. But for every one they're taking off the street, there's 10 that they didn't get, right? And so those are not actual numbers. It's just more perception. But they're taking more guns off the street than they ever have, which means that there's so many more on the streets. And so during COVID, they were like gun trafficking was happening like right under our noses a lot of times, but because everything was shut down, we weren't paying attention to those things. We were paying attention to COVID. But the organized crime didn't stop happening just because COVID was happening. And so the access to the weapons, the access to guns, our young people, we had a 7-year-old that brought a gun to school. We had a teenager that brought a gun to school, right? And so they're bringing the guns to school. And just because we see it and it's reported, again, for every one that we see, there's 10 that we don't. So it's alarming, and we should be outraged. And I don't see the amount of outrage happening that should happen.
But
we show outrage differently, but certainly there should be and should have been more outrage over these kids bringing guns to school, these young people being shot, especially our young women and our kids. Like,
let me take that as she catches her breath on that, right? The word that it is not in the conversation in this, particularly in law enforcement circles, is the word interdiction. See, interdiction is the military strategy to cut off the flow. Remember, we're talking about a public health crisis. That's the context in which we're addressing this. That's the model that we're using, right? Mm-hmm. First thing in a public health crisis, you study where is the problem coming from.
Right.
Right? And then the second step is, what do you do to stem its flow? Several years back, before Mayor Baraka became Mayor Baraka, he put out a study. He had a study done on this whole question of gun violence and the flow of it, right? And what did the results say? The problem with gun violence and gun trafficking is that the trafficking, a lot of it is done by corrupt police officers who are not being properly scrutinized, right? So that way, I mean, that's one of the main sources of where the guns are coming in from the South into the New Jerseys, into the New Yorks, into the Philadelphias, right? And that's a conversation that those kind of forces are still not comfortable having. Those and that should be one of the driving principles of the car that we need to have on the road right now.
That kind of goes back to the whole that police corruption thing is real interesting. And the thing that I'm asking actually for both Zayid and Kaleena. Not Kaleena. I'm sorry, Keesha. Keesha, you're head of the Office of Violence Prevention. What is it that what are some of the what are some of the things that we need to push? What are the things that you're actually pushing to actually help deal with violence prevention? And at the same time, when you're talking about interdiction, isn't that more police, right? Like the interdicting guns is police banging down doors, trying to find gun dealers, right? Like those gun task force. So what is the Office of Violence Prevention? What can they do? What are they doing? And is it like do we need more police to do a better job in interdicting guns, which seems the opposite of a lot of defund the police, et cetera, right? Like, so help me unpack that, and that you are public health and you're dealing with public health and innovative things. What is going on to stem this violence? And can you combine that with an answer about interdiction programs and guns? And so I know it might sound like a complicated question or a convoluted question, so my apology for that. But I just wanted to address the things that both of you said.
So, and as I'm listening to your question, and I'm also going to answer it from a place of our listeners and people who are listening. So the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery was created out of the George Floyd protests around defunding of the police. There was such an outcry around police brutality that was taking place. But ultimately, the city of Newark, we reallocated 5% of the police department's budget to be able to create the Office of Violence Prevention so that we can deal with violence from a public health perspective. And so while law enforcement is the enforcement, piece, and they do public safety from their lens, then there needed to be another lens. And this lens is public health, but community-based public safety, right? And having the community at the center of the work and having the community at the center of solving the issues and the problem. And so we have a public safety director, and then we have me, who is the director for the Office of Violence Prevention. And so with the Office of Violence Prevention, we have domestic violence, sexual violence, and community violence under one umbrella, where we are working and dealing with it from and getting to the root causes. Why are people committing crimes? Why are people continuing to be victims and survivors of violence, repeat victims and survivors of violence? How do we talk to the offenders? How do we, have a real strategy around it, looking at it from a data-informed perspective, looking at it from a community-based perspective. And my office is ultimately a clearinghouse for community-based organizations to be able to get funding to be able to do the work. We don't want law enforcement to be out here trying to solve crime. That's not their job. They enforce the law, right? So we want them to be able to do their job, but also ultimately there's other entities around public safety. They can't do it alone. We don't want them to do it alone. And so my office, I've been able to hire social workers. So for every 10 police officers that go into the police academy, I get to hire 1 social worker. Last year, we put in 100 officers. I got to hire 10 social workers or victim advocates or outreach workers. And they go to the academy and they learn some of the same 2C law and things like that at the academy, but ultimately creating some equity so that we all understand that when we go out together, we're all first responders. And so your way of first responding is different from my way of first responding, but we're ultimately working with the community step in step. And so I have the social workers inside of the police precincts currently, so that we can get the referrals from the police department, people who need additional help, people who need additional services, people who, need resources. In juveniles, there's an increase in juvenile violence and juvenile crimes and juvenile arrest. And so I have a social worker inside of juvenile services to be able to help the juveniles. Inside of the 5th precinct, a part of me getting in the Office of Violence Prevention, I have the 1st precinct of the police department where we are housed. And so I have my social workers, outreach workers, and people are now coming into that office as a community resource to be able to get assistance with relocation, with mental health services, substance abuse services, food, clothing, shelter, transportation, basic needs, right? And safety needs. How do people feel safe? What do people need in order to feel safe? And so the question around, do we need more police? Do we need less of these things? It ultimately depends on our community. My office and us, we put in more ownership on the community. Those who are closest to the problems are the people who are closest to being able to solving them, who has the solutions. And so law enforcement is not the answer. They're not the only answer. I know that, they are supposed to keep us safe. They're supposed to protect and serve the community, but we get to protect and serve the community too. There gets to be some ownership on us who live here, who work here, who are invested in the community. And so the Office of Violence Prevention, there's a $20 million investment into community-based public safety for us to be able to invest in our community partners, our community organizations. And so that's the ultimate thing around my office, providing resources for the community-based organizations. When we have shootings, robberies, stabbings, and all of those things, we go to the scenes, we go to the hospital, we're knocking on doors, we're asking people, what is it that you need? How can we help? Ultimately, we're trying to intervene in the cycle. But if we can prevent things from happening, we can be more proactive, then we don't have to intervene as much. And we don't have to do treatment as much, right? And so really being more proactive versus reactive is really...
Keesha, can you talk more about Director Eure, can you talk more about, because you've talked a lot about the recovery part of the work, but you guys are doing some phenomenal work in the area of prevention with young people, with the Newark street, you have a whole other entity of work where you are getting ahead of violence in the city. So can you talk more about that as well?
So we have, and with the Brick City Peace Collective, we're trying to coordinate, collaborate with the community-based organizations. And so we do have the Newark Community Street Team, the Hub, Newark Community Solutions, Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, My Brother's Keeper, Equal Justice USA, Hospital-Based Violence Intervention Program, Newark Community Solutions, Beth Israel Hospital, Newark Police Department, Rutgers. So we have several partnerships with community-based organizations who are doing the work. Hear My Cry, Mothers of Murdered Sons and Daughters. So different entities that we're working with, but we have a Peace Academy where we have young people who come to learn life skills, who are learning entrepreneurship, problem solving, decision making, our young people who are involved in things. And so we have an academy for them to be able to come to. For spring break in April, I took them, about 20 of them, up to Camp McDonald, and they learned archery and fishing and all sorts of things, getting them out of the neighborhood so that they can learn different socialization skills.
Because one of the things you talk about is trauma, right? And
right.
So if you're, do you see that many of the young people who are involved in certain forms of violence, that they are involved in those forms of violence because they are victims of trauma, and that is how you're trying to intervene as well?
Right. And so many of them are, like you said, have been victimized, have been exposed, right? So I'm doing the trauma to trust, where we're bringing law enforcement and community into the room, and we're having conversations with them around how law enforcement experienced trauma, how the community experienced trauma, but they also did one with the youth, right, and young people, so that they can see and talk about the trauma that they are experiencing. And they experience things vicariously, right? It may not affect them directly, but many of them have parents who are incarcerated, parents who are getting high. We have a huge overdose that's happening in the city that we're not even talking about: substance abuse, opioid overdoses.
Whoa, opioid overdoses in Newark right now?
Certainly, we have overdoses in Newark. There's a overdose response team that we now are like putting together, but that's swept under the rug because of the stigma around substance abuse. We want to keep acting like it's not here and it's not happening, but fentanyl is still a real thing in our community. We have young people. I think recently we had a student from Berryman that like overdosed. So there's several things that are happening, whether it's reported or not. Our young people are experiencing. They're experiencing sexual assault, domestic violence, physical violence, substance abuse issues, COVID with the lack of learning. Many of them fell behind. Self-esteem issues, self-confidence issues. Many of their parents lost their jobs. They're dealing with poverty. And so there's so many issues. And so, yes, they are experiencing trauma. And at the root cause of all of these things is mental health, right? But beyond that, these are some of the root causes of what we're seeing. And everyone says, oh, it's the house they came from, it's their homes. So we're trying to build family support. We know that there's a gap because we're dealing directly with the person, with the victims, but we have to deal with their family systems and people that's around them to help support them as well. And so a lot of the work that we're doing community walks in the neighborhoods. We're knocking on doors. We're asking, how can we help? We're responding to things. We're in the schools. We're doing safe passage outside the schools. Like just any and everything that we can do in order to be able to be proactive and not reactive. We're in the schools. We're talking to them. I was at Lincoln School today, at the Boys and Girls Club last week, talking to them younger and younger and younger. We're starting at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, because the age range is so much younger now. So we have to get ahead of it, and we're trying to be more proactive, but we need the community, we need the residents to be able to help us in this plight. But ultimately, my office is looking to be able to fund this work and be able to give resources to the community so that they can do the work effectively.
Now, when
Kaleena, let me ask you all a question.
Well, actually, there's a clarification, and Zayid, I have a question for you to just clarify with it. At the beginning of the conversation, you talked about the ease of guns, and Zayid, you talked about interdiction, right? And in terms of what that means. So what does that mean? Like, does that mean that in addition to everything that Keesha's doing, that that we need more police? Like,
No,
can you explain
no.
or unpack that?
It's focus. It's focus and priority. It's how you use the police. It's how you use your troops, right? We have investigative arms that have certain capacity that can be used in a way that addresses this particular crisis. It's not about.
But the reason why I keep pushing for more, a more explanation is because gun task forces have been legendarily brutal all over the country, like the gun task force in Baltimore, the gun task force in Newark. The one you're talking about, the gun task force in Newark, I think according to that study, they were very much responsible for certain types of brutality and corruption in terms of getting guns out. So so what do you mean by focus on that when it seems like it was that helped cause the problem? So I'm just asking for, like, how to make it simple. What is the difference between let's just get a gun task force, which is what a lot of people are going to hear. A lot of people are going to be like,
and that ain't what I'm saying.
So talk to me.
Right? No, I mean, interdiction is just like we talk about violence interruption on the streets, right? Interdiction is violence interruption of gun trafficking, right?
But how does that happen?
No. Let me. It's in the deployment. This is one of those places where those forces can work together, right? Those of us who do violence interruption work, we have our hands on where folks are vulnerable to be overrun with this, and then how that gets out of hand. Okay, and we don't have, all the military equipment and investigatory equipment that the police have, right? But let's go back to what the studies are saying, right? Because this is data-driven work, right? When the data says that there is a problem with the involvement of law enforcement being a part of this, that piece needs to be lifted up.
So when you're saying interdiction,
listen, wait, I'm trying to answer you now. In as much as we're talking about civilian oversight for general police behavior in our communities and respectively, right? There's a part of this oversight needs to oversee how these kind of investigations need to happen, right? And it's one of the reasons why there's always this big pushback from the police, because there is a place that of corruption that they have controlled, and then they feel like by virtue of the surface danger of their work that is real, that they are entitled to that, right? And that is bullshit. That is bullshit. It's corrupt, it's racist, it's anti-democratic, and it's wrong.
So I don't want to and I'll just open it up to anyone else as questions, but I'm still curious about what does interdiction mean and what does it look like?
It means interrupting the flow of the trafficking. If there are trafficking operations that are being run by corrupt police officers, there needs to be investigations in place that examine the behavior of what police officers are doing with that. Yeah, I mean, there's ways.
So you think that
there have been some folks that have gotten caught, right? Not many, because they don't really push that. But when officers are getting caught doing that, right? Those should be lightning rods for the kind of investigations that should be happening to stem this stuff.
And that would be usually like federal, and is local
joint, federal, state, local, and there is a place for that also with civilian oversight.
So you're saying that the civilian oversight, really, when you're talking about interdiction, you're not talking about kick and door interdiction. You're talking about as in using intelligence, as in because when you say investigatory powers, you're just basically is this just asking the question that we've been asking for years about drugs and guns? How does it get into the community?
Booyah! The answer is in your question, young man.
And so really, when you're talking about policing, you're talking about not necessarily kicking doors, but police can investigate, right? And one thing
they can clean and policing with civilian oversight, right? With proper federal oversight, because there's a place for the feds in this too. Let's be clear about that, right? Right? That their operations need not just to be made to behave right; they need to be cleaned up.
So if Newark was like, for example, like, and this is for Keesha as well. If Newark was to, like, both of you talked about guns, both of you talked about the ease of guns and how that was a problem. We get the ways in which to look at the problems of violence and trauma, and that has to be forefronted. But there's also this issue of guns. No one wants kicking doors. No one wants local police squads. I believe what I'm hearing is the problem was local police would have police squads, but it can't be like that because if it's just the police doing it, that's an encouragement of corruption. It has to be massive oversight of the police being able to use its legitimate powers, but not by itself, right? You need federal oversight, state oversight, you need civilian oversight, and it all has to happen at the same time so that you don't get a policy of kick in doors.
Yeah, but I think what we really need is the will. I think COVID has taught us, and the plastic bag movement has taught us that America can stop or start anything it wants to. COVID came, and with about a year of good PR and enforcement, everyone was wearing masks, and we were able to get a hold on a global pandemic. We want to start folks no longer using plastic bags, and now everybody is falling right in line and bringing their bags to the store, and so that's things that America willfully wanted to begin to make happen, and we're very clear about how to make things happen that we want to happen. So if America really wanted to stop guns from getting into communities or stop masks, the only reason that they are banning AR-15, I think that's what they're calling, is because the police are scared of those guns. That's why they didn't go help those kids in that school, because they were afraid of those. So that's the gun. Okay, we could take that off the street because that gun we're afraid of. But there's not going to be any of that until either the people cry out and make sure that, that this becomes important enough. But, you can't expect people to stop something that they start, create, and allow to continue.
Wow. The irony of Uvalde, and Kaleena, indirectly just raised Uvalde, is in the wake of Uvalde, what happens right in the heart of Texas? The NRA hosts this annual convention, right? And governor of Texas and the former president of the United States himself are the main events.
Absolutely.
Now, for our side that we should be proud of, right? The people of Texas, outraged by these crazy ass people, right, surrounded that damn convention. It was raising hell at that convention in a way that they haven't seen before, right? And they have been in an exclusive place with that particular lobby for years, right? So I was very proud and pleased to see that people moved on their behinds, that they're not above being faced with the outrage of our the people. I ain't gonna say our people, the people, because it was multiracial. It was white folks, black folks, Latinx folks. Everybody's out there throwing rocks at them fools.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here? Can I jump in this discussion?
Of course.
Or is my segment over and I'm
no, Larry, man, come on, man.
I think there are two sides to this. Well, there are two dimensions to the gun problem. One dimension is, as Brother Zayid was pointing out, is to stop the flow of illegal weapons into our communities. And this is a problem that doesn't just confront urban areas, it actually affects rural areas too. But the problem is the flow. They call it the iron pipeline. I didn't even know they had a name for it. and they know where the guns are coming from. The guns are coming from Virginia and Florida. They're coming from a lot of these red states that have either very little or no gun control at all. So, you know, I remember when Jesse Jackson was running for president, and that was in 1984, 1988. One of the big problems we had then was violence. This is not a new problem.
That's right.
He had two campaigns, 84 and 88.
That's right.
And one of his campaign planks was the federal government should appropriate more money for the interdiction of illegal drugs and weapons into urban communities. That was one of his platform planks. And why was he saying more money? Because under Reagan, they had cut back funds for drug interdiction. Now, here was Reagan's wife saying, just say no.
Just say no. That's right.
But at the same time, money to go to federal, state, and local police forces for drug interdiction was cut back. It didn't make any sense.
Right behind that, we got cocaine first, then crack.
That's right. That's right.
Right behind.
So this is still an issue. And Zayid is right. This is still an issue. I mean, I don't understand it. We got $54 billion to send to Ukraine. Do you know that's how much has been sent so far? $54 billion. $54 billion is more money than was spent on the Vietnam War from 1966 until the war ended in 1972.
Wow.
$54 billion is more money than the entire budget of the Russian military for the year 2022.
Wow.
Now we got 54 billion for Ukraine, but what about 54 billion to stop the flow of illegal weapons into our communities from the red states? AOC, well, how do you say her name?
Ocasio? Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. You got it.
She was in a committee hearing this week.
Yeah.
And in her remarks, she said 70%.
That's right.
Of the illegal guns finding their way into the city were coming from the red states that have no gun control. The red states are Republican controlled states. So Zayid is right. We should be demanding that the federal government stop the flow of illegal drugs and weapons into our communities, and that they should appropriate the amount of money needed, whatever the amount of money is needed to do that, they should do it. So that's one side of the problem, to stop the flow. But if by some magic we stop the flow tomorrow, like it's cut off, no more illegal weapons are coming in our communities. If we stopped it right now, there are 400 million legally purchased weapons being held by citizens of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
There are more weapons, legally held weapons. I'm not even talking about the illegal weapons. Legally held weapons by private citizens. There are more weapons than there are citizens in the country. There are 335 million people in the United States. We have on record 400 million privately owned, legally purchased weapons. We have more weapons per citizen than any other country on the face of the earth.
That's right.
This is why we have more mass shootings than any other country on the face of the earth. And if you stop, listen, wait. Let me finish. If you stopped the flow of weapons tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
we would still have to deal with the fact that there's so many weapons floating around in society. Now, how did other countries deal with that? When they had the Christchurch shooting in, I believe it was New Zealand. Is it New Zealand?
Mm-hmm.
When they had the Christchurch shooting, where this guy went to a church and killed up a whole lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
The country went into a state of shock, but they had good leadership. And the leadership said, we can't have this in our society. So they initiated a national gun buyback program. And they literally bought back the majority of assault weapons that were being privately held and legally held by citizens in New Zealand. Mm. So on the one hand, we have to do something to stop the illegal flow of weapons. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, we got to do something about the weapons that are out here now. Because if we don't, you'll still have the killing. That 18-year-old racist legally purchased.
That legally. That's right.
He legally purchased two, not one,
same thing.
Two AR-15.
That's right. They're born Uvalde, same thing, legal.
Legal.
Oh, by the way, Donna, I was going to say, welcome, Donna. How are you?
Hey, everybody. But I just wanted to also, Chairman, that young man, I believe Joe Madison pointed it out, that he was eligible to buy an AR-15, but he couldn't buy a handgun. So these laws are crazy. So it was, it was legal for him to buy the assault rifle, right, but he had to wait till, I believe, 21 to buy a handgun. These laws. So to me, that says they're purposely trying to put these weapons, these rifles, these AR-15s into hands of people for malicious reasons. They know what they're doing,
Right.
And it has to be stopped, and it has to be stopped quick, because what they're doing with the guns, and then also on the voter side, they're really preparing for the inevitable. What I don't want to, whether it be a civil war,
preparing for war.
Yeah,
they're preparing for war.
Yes.
Listen. In that statistic that I just gave you, about 400 million weapons. In that statistic of 400 million weapons,
there's no discussion about gun violence in New York City.
Listen, 3% of the population, 3% hold over 50% of those privately held weapons.
Wait, hold up. Stop. Wait, time out. Whoa. Wait. You said 3% of the population?
Of the 400 million legally held weapons in the United States, 3% of the population holds 200 million of those weapons.
So they're ready. They've been ready. Wow.
We're dealing with three of the funkiest lobbies out here: police unions, the NRA, and the military contractors. You want to bring this stuff together? You follow that money chain. That should lift up everybody's eyes and make it plain.
I know we're getting ready to we're getting ready to come to a close in the discussion. I would always like to, just.
Oh boy.
Yeah, definitely. But when we're talking about, we've been bringing a lot of stuff together, right? It seems like there've been themes from, we've been coming back to this Civil War thing quite a bit. It just keeps finding its way into these conversations. How, just as we close out, right? Just some words about like tonight, and just the way in which this has been working. And we could start with anyone. We can start with Donna. Donna, so talk to us about What is your impression of what's going on, and what words would you close us out with?
You muted, Donna. You muted, Donna.
Oh, no, we can't hear you.
I just believe that they are preparing to, take, to change our form of government, and they're going to do it whether they have to turn over an election or if they have to do it in the streets. And they keep deflecting with other issues, whether it be a document case or I don't know. We just need to keep our eyes and be prepared for what's coming next. And I don't care. What I get very concerned about is that we play into the narrative. Like, for instance, this was a primary. It's not an important race. We shouldn't get out and vote. We need to show our muscle because that's a place we can show our muscle. And we need to vote in every election. The voter turnout. We need to, and we can really scare people by having 100% voter turnout in our communities every time. But that's one. That's something we don't use. We don't use the tools that we have at the ballot box. And that's something that I think that we begin because we have the numbers, but we don't utilize. We talk ourselves out of it. And when I looked at the numbers for this past Tuesday, it's very disheartening. So,
All right, so I would, Larry, Zayid, can you briefly sum up your thoughts? I know we don't have much time left, but so just like close us out, and then we'll end off with Kaleena, our newest co-host. Zayid and Larry.
Go ahead, Zayid.
Southern Lies claim no easy victories. That united front that we're talking about that needs to come out of the convention is important. That's building on Donna's remark about the maximizing access to the ballot because, right, that's one of the principal points of attack of this whole thing. Is to gut the Voting Rights Act, as we know, was already gutted by the Supreme Court several years ago. So the degree to which we still have access to it, we better use it to the fullest, right? And we have got to change the political landscape of this country by one, stopping to concede any more ground to the right wing, right? If we can stave off them in this particular election and find somebody to kick Trump's behind in 2024 if he don't go to jail, and he probably won't go to jail. That's a big problem with this whole thing with January 6th. The punishment has been lightened in my judgment. If we had done that stuff, they put me under the jail for the rest of my life. I'm clear on that.
You wouldn't have gotten to trial. You'd have been dead.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So the question of the united front is impossible. And then there is this.
Remember, we're trying to wrap this up. We're trying to keep.
I know that we got to deal with also is that in as much as we're concerned about this whole question of illicit guns and this crazy use of gun with our folks on the streets. When I had our troops, when we first started shutting streets down, I would apologize to them for what we went through in terms of parenting for our generation because we got wasted with the crack epidemic and it totally weakened our community, right? And set out this chain of events. But there are more arms in our community also than we've ever had before, right? And they're not being used for defensive purposes, right? And so, I mean, and as buffaloes emerge, we need not give away all of our stuff for sake of being concerned about gun control. We just need to control our guns better and make sure that we use them to protect our community, since the government and the police clearly can't do that in our buffaloes around the country.
All right, Larry, we have only a few minutes left. I'm just
let me say that I agree totally with Donna, and I agree with Zayid that we need massive voter registration before the November election. And we need to urge people to vote. And we need to urge people to vote because losing the House and losing the 50-50 situation, even in the Senate, will be disastrous for us. A lot of people are predicting that we'll lose, but that's a prediction. That's not a guarantee. They said that we wouldn't win, and I say we. I say that in the Latu sensu, in looser sense. They said we wouldn't reelect a Democratic governor. It hadn't been done in 35 years to a second term, and Jersey turned that around. If we come out, we can win. Right. If we come out, we can win. We need to vote and try to hold on to the Democratic majority. And why do we need to do that? Because we need federal laws. Do you know that New Jersey?
Remember, we're trying to wrap it up. We're trying to wrap it up.
Do you know that New Jersey already bans the AR-15?
Yeah.
Right.
It's already banned in Jersey. 50 other weapons are banned in New Jersey, but they're not banned in 36 other states. So they come in here illegally. That's why we got to control the federal government.
All right. And Kaleena.
Massive political education. That's what we need. I don't think we can increase voting until folks wake up, get educated, start tuning into this show and shows like this more, reading, watching what's happening at the state level. Those hearings, those budget hearings and bill hearings, they are public. Tuning into what's happening. Like, we have to start getting educated and sharing that education. Like we talk about, you know, what's happening in music and what's happening on Instagram. We need to start talking about what's happening in the world.
Wow. Well, thank you. And thank you to all of our guests who've been on tonight. This has been a really packed show, and appreciate all of you. Till next week, good night. Larry, also special thank you to you as well, because you are like the MVP. I am an admirer of yours.
Stop it.
No, it's true.
Always leave smart. Just take notes when Larry.
So I'm just like, especially thank you, Larry, for coming on, and thank all of you.
Thank you for the invitation.
And Zayid, as always. And Kaleena, welcome here. Welcome to us.
Kaleena, you've been a good Panther kid talking that political education. I love that.
Y'all are dynamic. You know, I sit and listen to all of you and just take notes and learn. So we need to have more people watching this show and learning.
All right. Well, good night, and until next week.
All right. Bye.